as our sort of standard Sunday, we want to go into a little bit more of a discussion, hear more from yourselves, and we thought it'd be a good point to discuss the Curtis's appearance yesterday on GB News. So also joining us for tonight. Hello, Curtis.
Discuss my appearance. That's a bit rude. I thought it looked fantastic.
Only going to focus on your physical appearance and nothing else.
I will say that I actually wore Lewis's shirt. It wasn't mine. I had a white shirt ready and it was really creased. And he was like, "You ain't going on TV like that." I was like, "Yeah, probably a good idea." So we can thank Lewis for his garment.
I will say, I think Lewis was I think he's like a good usher for you overall. Like he chaperoned the situation
Oh, he's like
perfectly.
a mother. You stay around his house, right? Oh, have you ate? Have you ate? Are you thirsty? Okay. It's nice, but
Sounds the way you said it derogatory. You said it sounded slanderous.
slanderous.
But we do appreciate Lewis, and Cog also helped you prepare.
Yeah,
with
we had well, I would say it was a whole team effort, but we had Callum in there, with Cog, and obviously the famous No Justice, Helena. She gave us some tips, some lines. So yeah, I was well prepared. I was very well prepared.
So it was a bit of a weird one. Lewis's mother, 100%. I'd love it if next time Lewis is hosting, we can add that. Just say that to him. That'd be great. No context.
Mother of turn left.
Yeah, no context needed for that. But yeah, it was a bit of a weird. It was the first time being invited on a mainstream platform. And I think like we put out the statement saying like you were going to appear, see what people think. I think audience generally was on the same page as you and the other guys, in the sense of like seeing the value in it. I guess I don't know if anybody would have guessed who would have been the person who disagreed with the idea of going on. My mum guessed that it was me. But I think it probably makes sense for us to go through it in the framing of like what actually happened as well. So, because you were reached out to, we got followed on Twitter by someone from GB News a while back.
One of the producers, I think it was. Yeah.
And they had just said, like, I think they wanted us to appear for something to do with, like, Kamala, the Kamala campaign.
Yeah, the story with Labour activists going over to America to help with the campaign, which would have been a really nice one because I would have had something to say, and also I knew ahead of time what the specific topic was. It was only one topic. But we have an issue of our email system, so we didn't see that until nearly 2 months later or 6 weeks later. And then I replied saying, "Sorry, our emails are buggered." And then she, excuse me, she replied again. And because the email system isn't fixed, I didn't see it until another like 3 weeks. Yeah.
So they had been kind of hopping on a couple times. I think, so I've always had reservations on this, right? Partly because I'm like potentially over aware of like sort of the media literacy side of things. I get very nervous about that. I think some of the things that I was nervous about beforehand were kind of put to rest, but I also think there's other things that I'm still really wary of. And I think it's good for us to, because we want to show all perspectives, different sides that we want to talk about. I know Becca has asked in the chat. Also, can I just say I love it when people call me Sneak?
That's kind of cute, isn't it?
I think it's cute. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Gary was asking your name. I was like, Sneaker. I was like, "What's your real name?" I said, "It's a sneaky secret."
First name Sneak, last name Cret.
Cret.
I don't want to go into it in too much detail because I think we can talk it through as well as we actually watch through the clips and talk about different areas of it. But so for me, the thing that I know most of our audience don't even have TikTok, but a lot of the stuff that I talk about on TikTok is to do with media bias and media literacy. And I think that one of the things that's most dangerous is allowing extremist right-wing perspectives to be treated as unbiased or legitimate. And it's like that. It's called like false impartiality. And I actually made a video ages ago with Piers Morgan about Piers Morgan, not with Piers Morgan. That would be an immediate undermining of my own perspective. But I made a video about Piers Morgan because he had made a criticism of Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'd made a video saying don't trust him. Like, just because he said that does not mean that he's, because people were saying, oh, well, fair play to him, actually. I think it's quite a good thing that he said this. And I went back and was saying, like, the reason that he's now said this is because it gives him legitimacy. And then that means that people will go, oh, okay, he's not as dangerous anymore. But like,
Mm.
oh, fair play to him. He has pro-Palestine voices on.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
trust him. And then he turn around, and immediately after that, I think he tweeted Loki, calling him Kareem and telling him to like get out of there and stop being like, to get on his show again and stop being such a child, and like firing all this abuse at him.
Mm.
And so my fear with anything like this is that it gives an air of legitimacy by allowing them to present themselves as having leftist voices. There were reasons beyond that, though, that for you, like your reasoning for going on, which I think some of them also did make sense to me as well. Like, I want to throw it to your side from your perspective with it, because I think we've got so much in the chat as well. But yes, what was it? So from your side, it was a lot of it was to do with kind of a voice, like having a left wing perspective on there.
Yeah, and we're seeing both sides in the chat, and I mean, everyone's opinion is right. There's no right or wrong opinion here. They're all valid, which is why we had a big discussion. It wasn't just like, oh, let's do GB News. Like we did have it was pretty much all day, wasn't it? You know, I think I've probably been on record on Turn Left saying that I was disgusted that Labour MPs who went onto GB News back in 2021 legitimised the platform, and that's because the studio lights were going off. They had, it was terrible. Basically, it wasn't obviously getting numbers because it was new, and at time, if you're a Labour MP going on there, that was legitimising it when it wasn't. However, we're now in 2024, and they're pulling in numbers comparable to the BBC. And whether we like it or not, it has been legitimised. It doesn't mean that the journalistic integrity is legitimate. Obviously not. It's terrible. But as a platform, unfortunately, it has. And for me, I argued, I've always argued for the left to be in all political spaces as possible. We should be absolutely everywhere. So if I ran with that principle and then suddenly said, but GB News, we shouldn't go on there, I felt that might have contradicted it. Now, I think it depends how you play it as well. It's not just going on there and going, ha, 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 and then agreeing with everyone. I think that would have been pretty bad.
That would have been really bad if you'd agreed
It would have
with
been
everyone.
really bad. But to go on there and put on a perspective, which wouldn't, you might not hear these, the viewers of GB News, right, might not get to hear these arguments. If we allow this right-wing space to just fester with only right-wing opinions and leave it to the rubbish liberals to go on there to make the left look bad when they're not actually left-wing, then it's not going to change any minds, or at least give someone else a perspective. But I think if actual leftists with half decent analysis, which I think I do have, going on there, I thought it was worthwhile. And of course, it's also to grow our platform, because if we became popular off the back of GB News, look, there are people who've gone on there who've gone onto the BBC and Channel 4 and ITV. If we can use GB News to legitimise our platform, that means more people out there who don't watch GB News, who only watch like the BBC or whatever, get to see Turn Left. That means we've just grown another proper left-wing platform. So it's almost like literally using GB News for our own ends. And I say, why not? It's a tool. I don't think it's legitimised them, because unfortunately they already are legitimised. Now, there are certain things I would absolutely refuse to do. I mean, if I had a message from a producer saying, do you want to go on and talk about trans rights? I'd say, absolutely not. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, I can't promise that it's not going to come up in a conversation that tries to throw me off, which that's one thing. But if someone had said, oh, we're going to talk about trans rights there, I say, go fuck yourself, because I don't want to debate human beings, their existence. And I think that would be almost opportunistic and using people for that. So there's different context to it as well. But I think at the end of the day, I want the left to win so badly, and I worry about the rise of reform. And let's be honest, GB News is just a reform machine. I mean, they attack the Tories now because now they found another even more right-wing party, so they're safe to do that. Before,
And
no
because
one
Nigel
would.
Farage is an active shareholder.
He's an active shareholder. It's literally his show, right?
Yeah.
And beforehand, right wingers were less reluctant in the media to attack the Tories because it was like, oh, well, you're just legitimising left wing or Labour arguments. But now they can attack the Tories from the right with reform. So if we're going to just basically have a free media system that boosts reform, I feel like socialists, communists need to get on there and challenge it. I understand if people disagree. That's absolutely fine. But at the end of the day, our organisation, unlike many others, we're not a top-down organization. We do it by consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Had the majority of people turned up and said, no, let's not do it, I would say, all right, fuck that. I'm not going to do it.
Do you? So this, I want to kind of before we get. So we'll get into the clips and the actual experience of it in a second. Because I think, in terms of trans rights being off the table, as you wouldn't discuss it because it's harmful. It's missing. It's like it would spread hate. It would, I guess, like the reasoning for trans rights being something that would be off the table. Where the reasoning behind that, how do you apply that to other topics? Like, are there other things that you would not speak on because of the fact that it would be delegitimizing people, human rights, harmful, dangerous
Well,
in that
yeah.
respect?
I mean, I like listen to that. You could be like, okay, well, we're going to talk about racism, and do you want to legitimize that? But I think it's specific to transphobia, given how specifically when it comes to transphobia in the last 5 years has become so toxic for people. As in, like, the media has become so much more hostile to trans people, and that's why me personally, I feel like it's quite a specific thing. I can say, hey, look, I'm a brown guy, so if we're going to talk about racism, I can go on there and talk about it. You might, yeah, I could see you might say that's a bit inconsistent because then you might then say there's a whole host of things you shouldn't go on and talk about. But I just think because specifically that it's not just GB News, by the way, it's the entire media is insanely transphobic. I mean, like, some of the talking points you hear on GB News is no different to the BBC.
Yeah.
Also, I wouldn't want to be there instead of women. If women want to go on there and talk about women's rights and trans rights, then I shouldn't be there to, as a guy, step on people's toes and do that. It's probably not even my place to do it. So I guess it's
I,
in the context, it's actually kind of specific to that issue. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I think kind of. I mean, I think I think it lines up to this some of the thinking that I have with it, which is I think as like the trans women in sports debate, right? It's all
Mm,
a facade, a distraction. We know why they're having those debates. They're having them because they are being like the people who are anti-trans are also the people who are pro anti-abortion, like choice, anti-abortion rights. The ADL in the US is now funding companies and media platforms in the UK because it's a gateway thing of controlling women's bodies. So I feel like you wouldn't want to engage in that discussion because it's just a distraction
mm.
talking point. There are times that you would engage in that chat to say this is just a talking point, but I guess it's that thing of when you feed or starve a story. But I actually think it makes sense to talk about it in the context of this specific show that you were on because it wasn't a this is the topic, you're speaking on this topic, we're
Yeah,
having like there's a big
absolutely.
name on there or something. It was a panel show. And I think what is it called? What was it called?
I think it's called The
Saturdays or something.
Weekend Today, or
The
just The
weekend
Weekend
today.
Show. No, The Weekend
Today
Show.
today.
The Weekend Show. Was that?
The
Yeah.
weekend show. And that it's like described as being like a bit of a feisty run through of the news, right? So it's like and they had you and then they had someone from the Telegraph, the
Yeah.
sketch
Sketch
lady,
writer, Madeline
sketch
Grant.
writer,
Sketch writer.
Madeline. So I guess like their goal with that show is they have two people left and right. In your mind, why do you think they invited you?
So obviously beforehand we were like, right, you're going to be the token lefty, and they needs you to bash you, right? And I feel like that's not the case across the board on GB News. It is in some cases. By the way,
Yeah,
the weekend show is actually a more of a relaxed approach. It's kind
it
of
is.
probably appropriate. That was my first run, right? So it wasn't necessarily feisty or angry. That's not the pitch they were going for. Although, as you will see in the clips, the host tried making too light of the situation, and she kind of makes a joke like, "God, you guys are boring and serious." It's like, well, we are discussing serious topics.
So their goal with that show is to appear not as political. right? Like they
I
have
think.
that show on because it's like, hey, it's more lighthearted, it's a
Well,
back and forth.
yeah, I guess. But you know what? And people might disagree with me on this. But speaking to Madeline afterwards, who was the guest, we discussed how there is this elitist snobbery, which is quite funny speaking to someone from the Telegraph, I know,
Madeline.
about the BBC, how they look down on more alternative media. And actually, GB News are more open to hearing new voices because a lot of their content is on YouTube. Whereas the BBC, I mean, when Navarra, when they had their first appearances on there, they call them, oh, it's Aaron Bassani from the blog Navarra Media. It wasn't a fucking blog.
Mm,
And G News kind of gets, and this is not saying they're good or anything, obviously not, with their piece of trash, but given that their content is on YouTube a lot, they're less reluctant to platform smaller creators. As to why they would have lefties on there, I guess I don't know. I mean, I don't really care as long as we get to put a point across. I don't think it's because, oh, we really care about balance. It might just be they don't
no.
want to look biased, even though they're incredibly biased. If they only had right wingers on, people would be like, well, this it opens up
Right.
to more criticism, I guess. I can't speculate as to why they have, in my opinion, sometimes better left wingers on than the BBC. I mean, the most left wing you get on the BBC is fucking Jonathan Ashworth, and I'm sick of seeing
Hmm.
him. That's their left wing. Ed Balls going on,
Alistair Campbell.
Alistair Campbell, that's their left wing. And the BBC are just obsessed with Blairites. Anyone who's not a Blairite is kind of out of the acceptable form of debate. Whereas Jeebiners, I mean, you've had communists go on there before. I'm a socialist. I've gone on there. So I
I,
don't know fully, but I just, just take what you can get, I guess.
I do, yeah. I think I get that, and like, I think at first, yeah, we thought it was going to be one of those ones where they're going to be like, "You idiot little lefty weirdo!" Like
We
you're
were
going in as the
expecting
court
that though, yeah.
jester. Just to say, Jay, I think you've dropped in the comment. I think it's because of Ofcom rules. I don't think it's because of Ofcom in the context of like a coverage show, because they do have a lot of shows where they don't include anyone. And because it's a weekend run through, it's not. I don't think, based on Ofcom stuff, I don't
Is
think
by
it
the
would
way, sorry
fall.
to cut you off, but is Gary being an idiot again? Because we've
Um,
warned you about this.
Gary, if you're being a,
I can't
you're
really
meant to be. I
see.
can't actually see him anymore. I think he might have been
I think
banned.
he was muted, but I don't.
We will block Gary if he comes back with that. Um, yeah, I don't think in terms of Ofcom rules, it depends on the form of show it is. This could count as like a talk show, like a chat show,
Mm,
not a news show. So you wouldn't have to have you have to have a fair weight and balance in that respect. But because this isn't explicitly a political news show, I don't think it would apply. Um, I think yeah, the because I think that's the thing that makes me a little bit scared with it is that that is a less political show. That less political show will give people the idea of what you just said. You know what? Say what you will about GB News, they have more left wing voices on.
mm,
Still a show where they set the talking points, they set the stories. They didn't give you very much time to prepare, as we know. Um,
no.
can edit things, they can choose to put things out or choose not to.
I
Like,
mean, Lewis made a good point. We were watching it back, right, when we got to his. He did make a good point. It's like, what is kind of successful about GB News is the way they kind of like the aesthetic, I guess, the way they come across, especially on the show I was on, is a bit more light-hearted, and therefore it's easier for people to consume because people are quite sick of very serious, dark things.
and
And
it,
there could be
and
a
I
lot
think
of. Go
yeah,
on, sorry.
I think that's what scares me. I think it gives a friendly face to fascism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But then you could potentially flip that on its head or use it because there might be people who are actually less political watching that show because they're like, I mean, for example, my dad thought GB News was left wing until I told him, oh no, it's our most right wing platform. Granted, he doesn't watch it. He didn't really know much about it. He's just like, oh, I just sort of seen it for a few seconds. So
Mm,
like, remember, vibes and reality doesn't always match up.
yeah,
But like, given the style of it, there could be people who don't really tune into news at all, but G News feels more comfortable for them. And obviously, yeah, you're right. It gives an acceptable form of like fascism because my God, some of the people on that are like the biggest fascists in the world. Excuse me.
Mm.
But possibly we can use that to break it open and get left-wing voices in there, because some people might be, I don't want to say apolitical, but aren't so wedded to any politics. Like, I don't think we could really work out the entire makeup of GB News viewers. They lean to the right, obviously, but I've seen people and spoke to people who be like, you sound like a massive lefty, but you're watching it. So I don't think the viewers are unreachable. If that was the
Mhm.
case, I wouldn't have bothered with it. It doesn't mean that I think most of them are, by the way. I'm pretty sure me going on there with my blonde hair and nose ring,
Mm.
60% already went, who's this bloody commie?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the viewers on the actual GB News website said that. However, that is quite a very niche space. Like, you have to sign up to go onto their website to watch it. So
Yeah.
I kind of ignored those people. And
I think
I like my hair, by the way, so fuck you.
I think your hair is great also.
Thank you.
I don't think it's fair. I think that's the yeah, I think that's kind of the concern for me. I
Hmm.
don't think that GB News will I think GB News may get better at hiding what they
Yeah.
are, and that's what kind of scares me with it. But I think there are times when like debate can make positive changes, right? Like, but there are also risks with confirmation bias, adversarial conversations, impartiality bias, like the frame setting of all of it, where it can actually cause people's views to get more entrenched, or it can give people the focus on benefit on enjoying like a civil discussion.
Mm.
And I've talked about this before with like alien people have said like when I've made like angry videos, they'll be like, "You're alienating the right. This is why people are right wing." And I've been like, the thing is, if I'm not aggressive now, when am I going to be? Because at some point or another, we have to talk about the fact that these people are hurting us.
Yeah.
So I kind of get nervous about people who I know there was a couple of people who commented being like very civil, like good to have a civil conversation, a polite discussion, a proper discussion, an articulate
Mm.
discussion. And to me, that feels like that. I don't think that necessarily will make someone go, "Oh, I'm opening up my ideas." I think questioning the entire premise is a good idea. Like Jon Stewart when he went on Crossfire and he was like, "This is a farce. Why are we even here? Like you're doing this. Like I'm not going to perform for you." Like I think
Yeah.
that can be valuable as well. But it is again, it was your first experience of it, and I think I just think it's like a good thing for us to discuss as well. I think there's. Do you want to talk a little bit about the actual experience of going on? Because I know that you got into London
Yeah.
and then I
So
sort of lost
what
where we were.
I came, so initially I was supposed to be going on Mark Dolan tonight, which would have been probably more of a fiery thing. And I'm
I
absolutely
fucking
happy
hate
to
Mark
go,
Dolan.
and he's a massive grifter. He actually supported, like, massively supported Remain. He didn't just vote for Remain, but he like campaigned for it and then made like a parody video of Boris Johnson.
Hmm.
He's like Darren Grimes, where they were kind of like liberal Remainers, and they just grifted to the right. They have no principles. I'm happy to say that. If I'm ever
Yeah.
on Mark Dolan's show, by the way, I'll say it to his fucking face. I honestly cannot stand the guy. Um, he's a massive grifter, and I feel like if I was on that show, which was going to be Saturday evening, it would have been a bit more fireworks, and that was more
Hmm.
of a panel show. Like, he's the presenter, and you've got like two or three people squished on a sofa. Ugh.
Yeah.
And then they changed it to, actually, no, you're going to be on Saturday morning or Saturday midday with Dawn Neeson. And then I still didn't know if it was going to be multiple people or not, because I've never rewatched GB News before, so I didn't know
Yeah.
what style it was going to be. And then they said, all right, well, you're going to find out about everything in the morning.
Because they said they were going to call you the day before.
They said they were going to call me at 4 o'clock, and I said, "Is that when I'm going to find out the topics?" They're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, okay, that works out better then, because I've actually got like an entire evening and day to prepare." Um, and then I didn't get a phone call. I just got a message saying, "Hi, I'm one of the producers. I'm going to be your point of contact.
Hmm.
Blah 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 blah. Here's the address." Um, I was like, "Okay, what about the topics? Who's my panelist?" He goes, "Well, your panelist, your guest is your opposing guest is Madeline Grant
You
from
used to
Telegraph."
hosting.
And I was like, yeah. I was like, okay, Google her, because I never heard of her. And then I was like, okay, right, cool. What about the topics that we ain't going to know until the morning? Because I guess
Hmm.
sometimes on our show, we don't know. However, we're a budgeted thing. They
Yeah,
got
we're
more
not
money.
funded by
We're not funded by the Legitimate Institute and
Paul Marshall, the hedge
Paul
fund Brexit
Marshall.
boss.
Exactly. So anyway, I got a text about 8 in the morning.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, well, what we did though was we just covered all bases the night before. We talked about Ukraine, and we didn't expect Ukraine to come up, and that came up like fuck. We talked about Greg Wallace because we kind of expected that. We talked about assisted
Yeah.
dying. We was almost certainly knew that was going to come up. Louise Hay, which didn't come up, but that was kind of an easy one. And that I thought was only going to be three topics anyway. So we kind of covered those. And of course, we were like, right, what happens if they're going to try and say, like, what is a woman? So all these little traps
Just out of
we
nowhere,
were
yeah.
trying to like discuss that. Um, and then in the morning, we got the topics, and then it included like the cost of living. I was like, thank fuck for that. Because like that to me, where I'm at my most comfortable is talking about class-based politics
Hmm.
and inequality. So it's like, right, I will eat up on that one. So we got there. The producer wasn't at the front, so I was like, right, okay. Me and Lewis go in. We're sort of a bit like, oh, where do we go? And then they let us into like the green room. We sat down, and Madeline was already sat there, so we just had a bit of a chit chat. Um, and yeah, one of the producers came out and said, right, mic you up, you're on. And by the way, like, I don't know if you can tell on TV, but it is so budgeted. It probably looks slightly more professional on TV, but you can kind of tell anyway. I mean, if you look at the stream, you'll see like some of the glitches and stuff. I'm like, oh my God, do better. But the studio, like, it's half built.
Hmm.
There's like pallets everywhere. You can tell it's very budgeted, and they messed up my audio as well. Like you can literally hear me swallow and breathe and stuff. Which I
I'm looking forward to that bit
appreciate that.
of watching this.
You'll get sick of it after a while. Hearing me go,
Ugh, ugh.
exactly. It's horrible, isn't
Sorry.
it?
I didn't think you were going to do it.
Sorry.
Okay, that might be really tough to watch.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to have that reaction.
But I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I obviously I was nervous beforehand, but I felt like when we got in there, and I saw, to be honest, like Madam was very, very nice to me, by the way, but I could see she was very nervous, so that
Yeah.
made me feel better. And after the first topic, the nerves were completely gone. I was like, I think I got this.
Yeah. I
Um,
think that was what was I going to say about the noise? Not about the noise. I was really scared about just your general safety going in as well. And I was glad that Lewis came along with you. But I didn't know because I thought already as soon as you were like, oh, they haven't called, like they said they were going to call at 4 and now they're not going to call. I
mm,
was like, are they going to pull out like as you're on the way down? Are they going to like mess you around and tell you last minute? I think they kind of did do that, but then I wasn't sure. I was like, when you get there, are they just going to be racist to your face? Like, I didn't know what was going to happen with
mm,
you, so I was like messaging, being like, Lewis needs to be like bodyguarding you and like also making sure you're okay, because I know people who've been on TV before and it's been like they've just been like almost like ignored by the entire staff until they get on the show for the
yeah.
sake of like isolating you and making you feel really nervous and stuff like that. But I don't know if I feel better or worse that they weren't like that.
Well, I mean, like, obviously I've been there once, and it's only on that particular show, so I can't speak for other people or entire show. I can only talk about my experience, and my experience
Yeah.
was absolutely fine. Everyone was very, very nice. Um, that I didn't sense of anything like anything wrong. I also felt like it was quite balanced. Apart from one bit which you'll see, like there was some framing from Dawn, and but I pulled her up on that. But generally, like everyone was absolutely fine. Um,
I guess they do it all the time, right? Like this is their
They do
whole.
it. Like there is, look, there is at the end there's a sense of like sometimes you look on TV and you're like, oh, they fucking hate each other. They're horrible people. But you in real life, I mean, it's only human. You're polite to each other. Doesn't mean that like I don't think some of these people what they think is absolutely disgusting and rotten. But
Mhm.
from my experience, they were absolutely fine. Again, I can't. Again, this is like it was like you could tell it was like skeleton staff because it was on the weekend and because it was a bit of a lighter show. Who knows? I mean, it might be completely different. You go in during the week, you've got Lee Anderson there and all that sort of stuff. Could be an entirely different experience. So
Yeah. And I guess it's like some people are in it for the grift, some people are in it because they feel ideologically strongly about it. Like, I think, was it Febby talked about being on with Katie Hopkins at one point?
bloody hell.
And Katie Hopkins was like, after the show, she was like, I don't care.
Yeah, no, absolute grifter.
She was like, not bothered because it's not like it's a game. Um,
I mean, she's
which,
she's a wealthy white woman. She's not going to be affected
yeah,
by the policy. So, and that's the thing with the right. A lot of them are grifters because they're not going to be affected by it.
Yeah, well, of course, you're telling people, you're mocking the people that look up to you, right? Like, it's your whole thing is convincing them that they should be
Mm.
voting for their own harm. Um, you have to be someone who's quite. But then again, I do think like people. I think Lee Anderson might actually believe what he's saying.
Yeah, I think he
Nigel Farage
does.
doesn't.
Well, I mean, I think Farage definitely believes in his own racism, but
Yeah.
apart from that, it's hard to tell because there's so many grifters about. Some of them are more obvious than others. Again, Darren Grimes, Mark Dolan, biggest grifters. Um, Lee Anderson probably believes in what he says. He's a deplorable man. Happy to
Yeah.
say, extremely deplorable person.
Yeah. I mean, ugh. But I mean, either way, both of them. Yeah. So you got onto the show pretty well prepped.
Yes.
Shall we actually? So just so everybody knows, I haven't watched most of these clips yet. This is my blind reaction
Mm.
to some of these. So sorry if I do actually pull my headphone off if your mouth gets really close. But I watched one of them yesterday, and I
Yeah.
get like a weird stomachache thing about like watching GBUs sometimes. So if I do
Mm.
start like looking like this as we're reacting, but is this our first time doing a live react frame?
I think it is. This is very new for us.
Get ready, people.
And also, I'm going to critique myself because there are mistakes I made, and also I have to clarify some things because you got to remember I'm on a right wing platform with right wing viewers. Like the
Mm,
framing is important. I can't be like, and this is why we need to seize the means of production, and this is why, like, this is white supremacy. You can't do that. So some people are like, "Oh, why did you take that line?" It's like, and I'll explain as I go forward, but like, you have to kind of remember who your audience is. The point is to like dumb a lot of things down as well.
hmm
So yeah, but
Yeah.
we'll cross that bridge when we get to the clips.
Yeah. So we've got, I think, yeah, I want to make it like from my side as well. There's you actually, as you did optics wise, doing
Yeah,
discourse on a show, how you came across. Because I feel like from what I've seen already and from what the guys said whilst you were actually live, I feel like you've done that really, really well. Holding back my wider feelings about appearing on it at all, because
yeah,
it in my mind there is to an extent where I don't think you I don't think there was. I think there's a lot of situations that are catch-22 once you're on. If you blow up, it's going to be bad. If you are polite, it's going to be bad. So I'm not going to use like meta narrative,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I think I will talk about it in the context of the specific show
Okay.
and how you do. And I won't. I'm not going to criticize you for scritching your nose or whatever. Although,
I
cool,
will.
I've said it now.
You said it now.
Well, nobody else pay attention to it. But we jump into first clip? And what's the first one? Was this
I
the
think the
Russia?
first
No.
one is assisted dying.
Oh God. Okay.
And Davey Moo, you're in the chat, friend of the show. Um, I know this is really important to you. So yeah, that unfortunately is the first topic.
First topic. Okay, let's see what we get.
Assisted dying is one step closer to becoming legal in England and Wales after MPs backed the bill in a historic vote. The vote followed 4.5 hours of debate with 330 MPs voting in favour and 275 opposing. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, was one of the key people voting in favour alongside the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. The legislation would mean terminally ill adults with 6 months left to live are able to request assistance in ending their life. That's the basics of this story, isn't it? But as with all these stories, there is so much more.
That's the famous breathing can already hear, by the way.
I was going to say, I don't want to delegitimize. This is the. I think I've got two. I've got the optics framing of this, and then I've got the actual topic that we're discussing. Right. So this is on the optics side. That is so close. But
I
I
know.
also think maybe I might talk like her.
Wait, what? No, you don't.
She's like, there is so much to discuss.
You are nothing like her.
We're not so different.
And
Me and
it
her.
says she was very, very nice as well, but you're nothing like her.
Don't compare. But
You
I'm
just
nice,
compared
and I'm
yourself.
also not trying to bring fascism about in the country.
Yeah.
I've got other things that differentiate me from this lady, but I am a blonde lady with red lipstick on. So that may okay, cool.
So let's see what my panel make of this. Parliamentary sketch writer at the Telegraph, Madeline Grant, and founder of Turn Left Media. That's what it says on the tin, I suspect. There, Curtis.
You are quite correct.
Thank you.
Oh, wow.
It might do. Thank you very much.
So
we have two, right and left on this. But the one thing about this debate, both of you, is it wasn't divided between right and left, was it? Coming to you first, Madeline. It was divided between your personal choice. So you had the weird situation of sort of like people like Rachel Reeves and agreeing with someone the polar opposite to her, and Nigel Farage agreeing with people on the far left. MPs were allowed to vote on their personal reaction rather than their politics. But it was interesting.
Can I just check who she thinks of the far left
yeah.
Parliament?
That went through my head straight away, and I just thought I was thinking, should I say something for... Just pick your battles here, because sometimes you don't want to get sort of drawn into certain arguments which would have taken away from, by the way, the very serious issue we're discussing. But who the fuck is far left in the government? No one.
I don't know who she was talking about there. I think that this is one thing that, as an immediate take from what she's saying, I don't like the framing that she's put in there of like, we've got the left and we've got the right, but this topic crosses both sides. And actually, like Nigel Farage agreeing with the far left.
I mean,
Nigel Farage and the far left doesn't exist. This kind of equivocation thing immediately makes me very nervous.
I mean, the actual issue itself, I do think transcends political lines.
I think so.
But the arguments for and against are very different.
And the frames, I think it's just the frame setting of the show itself that she's doing that makes me nervous. Because I think actually this is a good topic to talk about. And actually it'd be quite nice if all parliamentary votes weren't based on the party whip, and actually imagine how good it would be if people could vote with their conscience.
It would be better. That's a tip for
mental
Sir Keith of Starmer.
To see who voted and how they voted.
Well, I don't think it was an apolitical decision. I agree it doesn't fall into simple categories of left and right. I think it was essentially the unfettered liberals of Labour and the Conservative Party who voted for this. But I think there was a bit of a right and left shift in the sense that there was the Lib Dems overwhelmingly voted for it. The new intake of Labour MPs.
Sorry, does she mean liberals?
I don't know what she was trying to refer to there. Like,
I wasn't sure if she meant left or not left.
That sort of whatever. Good on me.
Overwhelmingly voted for it, but I think like only 1 in 5 Tory MPs voted for it. And surprisingly, for me at least, more than half of the Reform MPs voted for this as well. So it is complicated. But I think that I saw a bit of a pattern emerging. MPs, often those who have, frankly, some of the poorer constituencies where they are, I think, more aware of the vulnerabilities, more ethnic minority MPs voted against it. I think it was often the MPs of seats that are a bit more well-heeled, where their constituents, perhaps they've heard from more constituents who view this as a matter of choice.
Sorry to pause it there. I'm quite surprised she took the line. I'm kind of glad she did, because she acknowledged class, which...
And race.
And race. I don't think she was... So, context with Madeline, she is ideologically against this bit, like assisted dying, not the bill. She was tweeting like all day about it. We were going through her Twitter, like she was mad about it. And I think that it could have been the most perfect bill and she never would have supported it. So I don't know if she really, given that she's a fucking Telegraph columnist. Again, she was very lovely, but a Telegraph columnist or sketch writer, I don't think she was that concerned about inequality between class and race.
No.
It might have been another thing to delegitimize assisted dying.
I think there was a fear with this as well, where there were a lot of MPs that were talking about the sanctity of life and the importance of life, and that felt like a real gateway with Nigel Farage saying that he's anti-abortion.
Absolutely.
And the ADL again coming into the UK, that felt like a scary frame of rhetoric. But I think, it's a fair thing to talk about in terms of there are a lot of like racism and like deaths related to racism in the NHS is crazy already, like due to the fact that people's illnesses aren't taken seriously or their decisions aren't taken seriously. So I can see the viewpoint from that side as well. But also, I'm not in this debate on the show. We're here to talk about you actually being on the show. Sorry. Let's go. Let's see. Well, she does seem quite nervous. And is that your mic that I can still hear while she's talking, or is that her mic?
Probably my mic. They don't They don't stop it. Like it's all free for all.
Oh.
They don't sort of pause it as you go.
Okay.
But yeah, no, she was very nervous. Like before we went on, she went, and I was like, I didn't expect that. But again, as a sketch writer, I don't think she goes on TV much.
No.
I'm pretty sure in the message I got was Telegraph columnist. So I was like, oh fuck, like they might be well versed on TV, and this is my first time. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, let's see. Let me unpause it. I just keep clicking.
And perhaps they've heard less from people who worry about the vulnerabilities and the risks of coercion. But for me, it was that point about liberalism of both parties.
What did you make of it, Curtis?
Well, just as we went live, we were discussing about how there was a vote in 2015. It got voted down. And in fact, one figure, Wes Streeting, voted in favour and today voted against. Where I disagree with you is the fact that
You are very
this
loud.
does actually feel quite apolitical. And I kind of get sick of politicians when they say, this thing isn't political, that thing isn't political. It's overplayed. But actually, in this specific instance, it does cross party and political, well, mostly political lines.
Yeah, I agree with that.
yeah.
I didn't say otherwise.
Yeah, sure. And for me, my personal position is I principally support assisted dying. I think the idea that those who are suffering are having to wait to get sort of a dignity in death. There's people I know who've had family go through this traumatic experience. However, I also have a practical approach. So we probably don't really disagree an awful lot here because I don't think I would support this in practical sense. I want to touch upon what you said about coercion. I do think there are issues with safeguarding. I look at Canada, the maid system over there.
Yeah.
It's a terrible, terrible situation where there is legit coercion. People are going through this route because they're seen as a burden on the state. And I absolutely think that's a really important point to talk about. But in terms of coercion...
I like your politics hands.
Thank you. I
I
crafted
think
myself.
they're really good. Oh, actually, I've paused it at a weird time.
Thank you. Now look at my tongue.
Looking directly in. I think you seem really comfortable. You seem very, very confident. Madeline is not just a sketch writer. She is a journalist on she published an article last week about from policing to tax. Keir is 2-tier on everything.
Right. Okay.
So she is ideologically fully on that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I don't think you. If you're someone who's kind of left wing and works for the Telegraph just as a sketch writer, I don't respect that.
No,
Like,
I don't think
work for a publication if you don't agree. So I assume even if you're just like doing the graphic design for the Telegraph, I feel like you embody their politics. You know.
Yeah, she's like fully writing for them about. I mean, she does a lot of like clickbait more than anything. Like, she doesn't seem to actually focus. She doesn't go into culture war side of it. She just mainly focuses on like Badenoch is at her best tackling Mr. Punch at PMQs kind of thing. But she's kind of I think she's probably sort of middle of the road in terms of their writing. But you seem very comfortable. I think you can tell that she was very nervous and you did quite well there. In terms
Leading back, which was
in cash, exactly.
Well, I mean, that was that. It was a strategy. It was like you need to be relaxed and sit back. So I did that, and to be fair, I felt comfortable doing it. But I think I was criticised by one GB News viewer who said, "Look at him sat back. These people these days not being proper." Shut up. That's what I can say to that.
Sitting back, I wouldn't have been. I'd have been sat like.
So it's fair. David
how I am when I focus.
David makes a good point. He says, "So with respect, isn't it weird to say it's bad to be left wing and work at the Telegraph, given the discussion here?" I get that, but I'm not. I'm not working for G News to like advance the cause. I'm there to like challenge right wing talking points. I feel like that's different because if you're working at the Telegraph and you're saying the same right-wing politics, it makes no difference. Or if you're even just doing graphic design for them, you don't really necessarily say any politics, you're not still speaking out against them. Whereas here, like I'm specifically speaking out against right-wing politics. So I get what you're saying, but I do think it's different.
We may continue. Let's go. I keep saying that to you like I'm not pressing it.
I would say actually the state isn't getting involved. They're actually backing away, because one could look at this and say, well, the state is mandating that I have to draw right at the end of my life in a very painful way. And actually this is probably where the government sort of backs out. So we can go into where we disagree. I think principally it's a good idea, but I don't know if I were to be, I wouldn't want to be a politician today to vote on it. I don't think I would vote for it, but I have respect on both sides, actually. I don't pass any judgment. Both sides have put across really good arguments.
Would you have voted for it out of interest, Madeline?
I would have voted it down. It would have been perhaps the thing I would feel most strongly about voting down. I think that this is
Why would you vote it down?
I think it's a terrible, terrible bill. I was disgusted, frankly disgusted. I'm sorry, I know we're meant to be jolly today, but I watched it all day like yesterday, and I did not see anything that gave me much hope. I think what was truly unforgivable...
What does she mean by we're meant to be jolly?
Well, because the Dawn was like, we need to be like really just I don't know, happy and jolly. I mean, to be fair, she said it that before we went live. She was like, oh, assisted dying, I don't want to talk about it. We're going to get over this like really quickly. She wanted to like get onto it quickly. So much so that like she cuts me off to move on. And I'm like, I get that, but also you can't, this is such an important topic to be like, oh, well, we want to be jolly today, let's move on. So it was treating a serious issue as glib.
Yeah, this is the framing thing that fucks me up. Like, I don't, like,
Yeah.
we're meant to be jolly. Why does she want you to act friendly?
I don't want to be jolly
polite
when I'm
and free
talking about
friendly.
people's lives, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird to me that she's been given a show where there's clearly some, I don't know if I'm overthinking it, but if there's a direction of we want this show to be a jolly show where we have the left and the right on
Yeah.
together in a jolly glib environment, then that makes me really nervous.
Yeah,
Why are they doing that?
She's just like, she's very charming and she's trying to be charming, and it's like, yeah. But again, that's our criticism, another criticism of GB News. It's like making light of a situation. It's like, but you'll see how I don't really make much of a light. I mean, I smile, I laugh a little bit, but you know, every topic I speak about is serious.
Yeah, I just don't know why she would want everyone to be. Well, I do know why, but I think it just gives me a weird feeling of like, no, smile and play
It's
nice
like,
together. Look like you're on
most
all
people,
on the same page.
Most people in the corporate media are there because they're passionate about being in the media as a job in of itself, rather than I want to be in the media because I want to talk about the issues. There's like, for us, we didn't choose the media because, oh, it'd be quite cool to be in the media actually. And we're like, oh no, we really enjoy these issues, and then kind of get pushed into it. Like when I was younger, I wanted to be an actor actually, not do politics content. But I felt my duty to do it. But I guess someone like Dawn and other people in the media, I probably 99%, wanted to be in the media when they were a kid, and the issues come second.
Yeah, and they want
You know what I
money.
mean? So she's in an element because she's enjoying her job by being a TV presenter. Okay, fine. I'm glad you enjoy your job, but at the end of the day, this is not. You're not hosting the weather,
yeah.
or you know, you're not even hosting a TV show that's apolitical. It's very much about politics, and it needs to be taken seriously. But that's not a criticism from me at GB News. That's a criticism of the entire ecosystem. Like, you get that shit on the BBC. You know, oh, why is everyone so doom and gloom? That's not just GB News. They're just more obvious.
False civility is very uncomfortable all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I guess it's not so much about Jackie, what's her name? Sorry, Dawn, the lady.
Oh, Dawn, yeah.
I thought she was called Jackie, the lady on the show. I think it's like, why has GB News chosen to put out that show? Because they're about every man, every person. We're all the same. We're not that different. That's the bit that makes me feel very scared. But so it's weird. It's interesting that Madeline called herself out by saying, "Oh, we're not meant to." I know we're meant to keep it light.
Yeah, I mean, I think me and Madeline both did a good job at tone, though. Obviously, I disagree with everything she said, but like both of us did, and I guess. But the thing is that you don't. It's not a natural thing to be jolly when talking about these subjects. It's natural to be serious.
Yeah,
and she probably knew that, and her job was to lift things up again. And it's like, well, you didn't succeed. I mean, you succeeded in your own thing, but she didn't succeed about making us all jolly and stuff. Because I wasn't going to get roped into that. Because especially given this particular thing, because I have a principled stance and I call it a practical stance, and I know there are good people on both sides. So it's not a comfortable thing to talk about, especially when there are people either side will disagree with me. So that's the last thing I want to be jolly about.
Yeah. I think it's a weird starting point for a show where she was. Or maybe the reasoning was that it was like a not right and left topic, or maybe it was just that it was big news and they had to cover it. So she was like you said, wants to get it off so then she can talk about Christmas holiday or whatever the. Oh no, because the next topic was Russia Ukraine.
No, and then I think she
Just
made
a
a joke like,
light-hearted.
"Oh, it's about Russia Ukraine." Like, well, we weren't talking about mince pies the whole show, so it was kind of weird that she framed it that way because every topic we discussed, the last one was the least serious, but I still made it serious. But we have Greg Wallace, and then we have Russia Ukraine. Like, none of these are jolly topics.
Russia Ukraine is a hilarious one for the Saturday.
Yeah.
Right, let's go into the video because we're I knew we were going to take ages going through this. Let's go on.
Unforgivable was the number of supporters of the bill who were saying things that were factually untrue about the bill that has such high stakes attached to it, than that they were urging their colleagues to vote for. Kim Leadbeater, in her speech, I think said sort of like 10 things that were factually wrong. So, for example, she said that no jurisdiction in the world that has begun with only people with a terminal diagnosis has ever expanded their criteria. It's a flat-out lie. This is exactly what happened
Holland
in Canada.
and Belgium,
Yes, exactly. And this was just one of many either misunderstandings or outright lies. And frankly, Kim Leadbeater said so many things that were false that I just don't think you can say that this is plausible deniability. I think to have the audacity to want to impose something that fundamentally changes the relationship between the state, the individual and mortality in this way, the least you should bloody well do is know your own bill and not say things that are false. She actually had to come to the chamber at the end of the day to correct the record because she had said something that was factually inaccurate about having the judiciary behind her. So I just think that alone is a good reason to be very suspicious and very worried about this bill, because if they make these basic mistakes at this stage and misrepresent it to people, then what hope does that give us that further down in the process they will be conciliatory and involving the people that need to be involved to get it right?
I do want to quickly comment about the judiciary, sorry. It is slightly different in our parliamentary system that the bill isn't just suddenly expanded. Any expansion or changes to the bill does have to go through Parliament. And that, of course, when something goes through Parliament, people vote on it, it causes a national debate like we're having today. So I wouldn't say it's quite as easy of, OK, we're just going to suddenly expand it. I think that's something we need to bear in mind. However, you are, again, correct in saying that there is an issue with this, not this particular bill, but the idea around assisted dying that worries me about those who are poor and disenfranchised. And I don't think it's the best idea to do it in the state of this country at the moment. I mean, at the moment, the NHS is being carved up to private profiteers, and they're making money off of our British health service. And I find that quite worrying, putting something like this, which is very, very delicate, through the state of our country, the state of our public services. And again, the fact that our public services are being carved up to the highest bidder, that worries me.
I think that's it.
And then she moved you on.
Yeah. So I think I wanted at the end to talk about like the state of public services and privatization. But obviously it didn't get to it. I mean, it's hard in that discussion to be like, right, I want to get my talking points into what the wider issue, because this specific issue is quite serious. I don't want to treat it as like, I don't care about that. I want to talk about left-wing politics. But I felt it was important to talk about at the end. Like, look at it worries me having assisted dying put through when you've got not just West Streeting, but everyone who supported privatization. You know that the NHS isn't running as best as it could be because there's an element of profit motive in there rather than just 100% patient care.
Yeah. I mean, do you think any of the topics that were given were like a left and right thing? Like they didn't talk about the immigration thing, which I thought was strange because there was the like Keir Starmer's immigration.
Very surprised
that
immigration
didn't
come
get
up.
Trans rights didn't come up. Palestine didn't come up. Obviously, they wouldn't talk about Palestine anyway.
But that's the thing. All of these topics were kind of like consensus based in a way. But that was fine for me because here's the thing: you can agree on two people can agree on something, but for their own different reasons. Like we kind of agreed that this bill probably wasn't right, but hers was, I'm ideologically, I fucking hate saying this word. I'm principally, I'm principally against this because she doesn't support it, and I wonder. I don't want to speculate about her religion, but I wonder it could be from a spiritual thing that she just doesn't see it as a good idea. And like again, no perfect bill could do this. Whereas I was technically agreeing with her in terms of the bill, and I was worried about coercion and people being seen as a burden on the state, but principally I was in favor of it. So you can still kind of have a genuine discussion even if you kind of agree. So even though these topics I found mostly were like, oh, you should be on the same side, we still find disagreement, and I still put my points across, and she still calls me a Marx.
Does
I
she?
love.
Okay.
Or she says, oh, you go into the realm of Marxism.
Oh wow, of course.
Which I'm like, to be fair, deep down I was like, I am a Marx. I am a Marxist.
True, but that's interesting. That I was going to say I'd like to see some of the other episodes of it. I will not go and watch a single view on their channel at all.
Oh no,
Bros, don't anyone go over to their channel. Watch it here through the lens of Curtis. If you're going to watch it at all, please don't give them any fucking buffer, because they don't care if you're left wing or right wing. They're just watching you. They just want your views. But it's interesting that they specifically have chosen things to be like, oh, look across the aisle. We're reaching across the aisle. Madeline Grant is also, I don't know what this is, but she appears on the website as one of the key people for Onward, the think tank. Do you remember them? They're the think tank that said that mandatory national service would be a good idea for young people. They're a Tory think tank.
Yeah.
So I don't know what her role is within that, but
that's quite funny because that massively contradicts her view about state control. She's like, I don't like, because she thinks assisted dying is an overbearing state because they're mandating you to die, which is obviously a load of crap. But she's making the argument there, but also saying you should go and young people should do national service, which is an overbearing state.
I don't know if I think she believes these things, because she was a speech about, she's given speeches with Onward before, and I guess that's the same thing, isn't it? It's like whenever these Tories are talking about sanctity of life, when, like, before now, when
Exactly.
We didn't see that at all.
I did have a prep, which I thought each topic we were going to have a little bit longer, but I really, really want to nail the point, which I didn't get to, was I do find it hypocritical from conservatives and right-wingers who are talking about coercion and the issues with this bill, yet you're happy to deploy the rhetoric of we need to cut benefits because unemployed people aren't productive, they're not working, we should strip disability benefits because some people aren't really disabled, this sort of crap. And it's like, well, hold on a second. If you are worried about this assisted dying bill because you're worried about people being seen as a burden on the state, then maybe don't join in the horrible narrative that just because you're not in work, that you're not a valued member of society. That's, like, if we didn't have that as a part of our culture, society, if that wasn't part of the national culture, then things like assisted dying would be far easier to support. So you're actively undermining that. Didn't get to that. I got cut off.
I think that's the hard part with this, is that because you didn't have an idea of the time frame, and also, to be honest, if you'd started saying it, they would have moved on. You wouldn't have had the chance anyway.
But I mean, Dawn was very keen to move on from the subject anyway.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I let her get away with, not on purpose, by the way, but I let her get away with moving on, but I don't do that again.
Yeah.
Let's go to the second clip then.
Let's jump in. Also, appreciate everybody dropping the comments in the chat. It's a really difficult topic. As I said to a friend last night, I'm still untangling it in my brain because there are so many conflicting aspects. But I also don't want to fall into the virtue signaling of like everybody's made some really sincere good points, because I don't think people in Parliament are doing that.
Yeah, not when I say I have no judgment on both sides, doesn't mean that some of them aren't.
Yeah, I mean, individual people in our chat, I very much appreciate your perspective,
because the people that watch us are reasonable.
Yeah, I don't care about BBC News saying, "Oh, everyone's been really heartfelt."
Yeah,
right. But so then we went from a very heavy topic
to this is Russia Ukraine, so even heavier topic. Well, nice. I mean, arguably just a heavy topic. Mm-hmm. So we'll see with that one.
The weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. We've been just chit-chatting in the studio during the break about how ready we are.
Just chit-chatting.
Madeline Grant. Curtis Daly aren't ready
Look at
at all.
production
And it's
value.
December
Just
tomorrow.
fucking tank in my
Okay,
head.
right now, a bit of serious news again. In an interview last night, President Zelensky has suggested he's prepared to end the war in return for NATO membership, even if Russia doesn't immediately return seized land. Zelensky's proposal would signal an end to Ukraine's attempts to win back force by those territories that have been seized by Moscow. Okay, you know, Curtis and Madeline, as you've just heard, you know, we're talking baubles, are still with me. Curtis, now I thought all this kicked off, right? Okay.
Why is she reading it like it's a story, like a children's story? And Zelensky has said that he might not end the war if there's people that are dying, lady. This is what I don't like about this. This is what I really don't like. I don't like this aspect of like there's a very, very scary side to presenting extremely serious and harmful things that this company has a vested interest in. GB News has a vested interest in a perspective, and it's hurting people. It's actually genuinely encouraging further killing, and to then be like, well, it's just Russia, I don't know, like it's what makes me really itchy.
And this
So
optics,
uncomfortable.
is as I was saying before, it's successful for people who
Aren't political will go,
people
oh,
aren't that
thank
political
God
who
I've watched
don't
the
want to go on
light.
the BBC. But then that's why I see it as an opportunity that we can weasel our way in there. But you know, let's get into
Keep it light, though.
a very light story of a nearly 3-year war.
Yeah.
When Russia said, like, we really don't want you joining NATO because that's when, you know, we feel threatened, so we're going to invade, and that's how the war all kicked off. And now the Ukraine are going, well, we'll call the war off if we join NATO. Does that make sense to you? Or is it just me?
Well, I think the timing's very interesting from Zelensky. I think what we know is that Russia's economy is suffering right now, and they almost can't afford to keep up their efforts. And I think that, to be honest, I think Zelensky's probably making the right move. I think he doesn't have another choice, to be honest. But it's he's essentially extending to Russia, look, I can see that you are struggling financially to fund this war. How about we maybe actually have a peace settlement and we join NATO? It's kind of funny, though, because it's what both sides don't want, but they're kind of equally losing.
Yeah.
Of course, like, you know, if it was our country and people say, would you give up part of our lands? You wouldn't, and the Ukrainians will probably say the same thing, most likely. But then, of course, that then means that Ukraine might go into NATO. I do think that's interesting. Now, I mean, Putin wants to take control of Kherson.
This is the point where I lose my point, by the way. It sort of just flew out my head, so I had to fill it. I kind of looked at the iPad, and I bring up a fact, but I lost it there. But I think I hit it well.
Did you have an iPad? I've only just noticed that.
Yeah, no. So that I'm so glad they allowed us to take in notes.
Oh,
So I had an iPad of our talking points in there.
That's really good.
That is very helpful. I mean, she had a little notebook and she was like squiggling in that, and I got well, it was Lewis's iPad actually, so and I didn't drop it.
Thanks again, Lewis.
Crimea,
Thanks, Lewis.
to make it harder for Ukraine to go back in. I think
also, yeah, I did have a lot of pushback of what I said. So I mean, what I want to say, which I do find quite funny, is that like we look at Russia's economy, say, well, because it's growing, it's doing well. I was more interested in the fact that the ruble had completely plummeted and to the lowest levels in 32 months. And the reason why growth isn't a good indicator of Russia's economy is the way us leftists attack those in the media who say that growth is a good indicator of how our economy is doing. And this isn't to attack anyone, but I've had people throw growth figures at me, and I'm like, but we wouldn't use this as an indicator of how well the economy is doing. It just it's one fiscal number that doesn't really mean anything, and politicians deploy it. There's so many other factors. So okay. I mean, to be fair, I have asked people to send me more information on why they believe the economy wasn't struggling as much. So I am all ears, by the way. But there's so many other points I make about this. I don't want to get distracted on that. But I did want to say that I didn't think growth was a good indicator of necessarily seeing how their economy was doing.
Yeah. I just can't believe they've put NATO, Ukraine, Russia as like a light Saturday topic. I'm trying to figure out why. This is like every single thing that we're watching. I'm like, why have they done this? What are they gaining from doing this? And I can't get my head around this one. Like, it's just a weird topic for them to have chosen.
Yeah,
But,
I know, and I was surprised, and like because
if they are trying to play nicey, maybe they've just got a certain amount of. Maybe it's like when there was the Russian propaganda in the Daily Mail, or the Telegraph, where they included an insert every week, and there was a certain amount of words that had to be used in every single thing. So maybe they have a rule of like every show you have to mention something about Russia being good. So I don't know. It feels like a very weird, out of place talking point for a light, friendly, happy show.
yeah.
It's
But
weird.
like, I didn't want this to come up because I mean I'll happily admit this isn't my strongest point. So we prepped for it, but we're like probably not going to happen. Then it came up, and I was like, fuck. Because again, I said I'm better at other things, and I'm happy to admit that we're all human. But I think I put some good points across. I talk about Trump as well, and that's something I really want to talk about. I managed to get that in there, but time's getting on, so we'll play it.
I don't really know if there's a strategy here from Putin. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. What does really strike me, though, is that for the establishment media and the corporate media, they attacked and criticised everyone who said maybe we should ensue for peace. They said, oh, you're a Putin stooge, you are. I mean, I remember Jeremy Corbyn said we should do this. We should have a peace settlement before war, not afterwards. And by the way, I actually disagree with him on some stuff in terms of he doesn't want arms being sent to the region. I'm kind of relaxed about sending arms and aid to the region. However, this is always going to end up in a...
I also enjoyed the fact that I was trying to talk about this and they just had fucking Starmer's face all over it. Like I didn't want to look at Starmer, and we're already looking at GB News, and now you got Starmer on there.
This like sickness on
Apologies.
sickness, yeah.
Sickness on sickness.
settlement. And I think a lot of the hacks in the mainstream media are probably looking very stupid right now, calling anyone for peace that they're Putin stooge. And Jeremy Corbyn is essentially right.
Okay,
and this
okay,
is what's
let's talk to a hack in the mainstream media.
Not everyone, by the way.
Fighting talk, young
There
man.
was a weird mood at the start of the Ukraine war, or not even just the start, but the first year and thereafter, that people who were arguing for some kind of realpolitik here were kind of suspect, and their motives were impugned, and it was implied that they might be like a Russian stooge. And I remember that very well. I haven't really expressed many opinions on this because it's just I don't know enough about what's going on the ground, and we hear such conflicting accounts. But I think what this tells us here is also, as well as what Curtis has been describing, the impact of changing Western leaders. Donald Trump has made it
Trump
very
coming
clear.
in. Trump did say that he's going to be in power and sort it out.
He's made it very clear that he wants to have a settlement, but also that.
I mean, I don't think we should give Trump. I'll let you finish, but I don't think we should give Trump credit for this, though.
You didn't let her finish. You didn't
Yeah.
actually let her finish.
No, sorry.
I'm
Excuse
not
me.
giving anyone credit. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if it's a good thing. I
great.
mean, it's.
So she doesn't say, I'm not giving anyone credit, right? But this is where I read between the lines. She didn't say that. However, bringing up that, I don't know whether this is to do with change of Western leaders. Suddenly there's now a development where there could be a peace settlement because Trump could get in. By insinuation, that is giving him credit. Whether she
she's
realised it or
she's
not.
laying out
She's laying out this
like, anything
narrative.
could have happened. I guess the change in global politics.
Yeah. And that is
Yeah.
what Dawn also leans into, which I push back on. Even if she doesn't even realise she's saying that, that's why she's like, I wasn't giving him credit. It's like, but insinuation, you actually were, though.
It's interesting that she said that fighting talk, young man, and made it out like you're being aggro. And then she said the thing afterwards where she said you didn't actually let her finish.
Well, yeah, because I said there's so many hacks in the mainstream media, and she goes, let's talk to a hack in the mainstream media. Again,
Yeah,
that was
that
just
feels
a
like-
light-hearted joke. I didn't really take anything personal from that. And like, it's more about, again, like theatrics, like fighting talk. It's not, you don't really need to read into it too much, other than the fact that this is such a funny show. I'm
Yeah,
don't
read into it too much. Difficulty level impossible for me. Let's go into the next thing.
True.
Let's see how she goes.
It's very sad what's going to happen. A lot of innocent life has been lost. It's been a horrific war. Ukraine is battered, and they've been so brave, and it's horrific. But what can the West do if it's not going to start committing troops to getting fully invested in this war? But also, it's not just Donald Trump. The German coalition is collapsing. Macron's policy on this has been a bit all over the place, I think. I think Keir Starmer has been pretty supportive of Ukraine, but perhaps not. Things are different to when the beginning of the war, when that started, and it was
really
Boris Johnson being extremely bullish.
In theory, it's a...
To be fair,
doesn't.
I didn't need to attack on that because she admits I don't really know much about it. So she's just sort of filling the airwaves.
Yeah, she's
But
just sort of saying
saying things.
she
War
doesn't
is
know what to say because she doesn't know if she should be supporting Ukraine or not.
possibly.
Yeah, it's just, I guess,
I don't know what. I mean, I don't know how everyone's position at the Telegraph is like. Are we secretly pro-Russian or not? I actually don't know. All I know is that yeah, she doesn't. She didn't
they're
really
pro
know what she's about.
Trump. Yeah, it's weird. I don't. This feels like one of the ones. I don't know. I feel like this could have been a good point for you in terms of like actually going to them. Like, why are we talking about Russia today?
Yeah, true.
Like,
Yeah.
you guys can't help yourselves putting Russia in every chance you get kind of vibe.
Hmm.
Because it feels like it's just, this is just like people who are watching this because they like a little bit of a friendly morning show. Why the hell would they want it? They're not going to enjoy watching this segment, right? It's so weird.
I honestly don't know. I mean, I think you're right. I could have attacked that, but I did also want to like. I wanted to counterpoints, and I feel like there's it could have been one or two ways. It could have been why are we talking about this, or I wanted to, especially when she brought up Trump. I was like, no, I felt like I really needed to counter this insinuation that because the wider thing here is that you're getting more and more people praise Trump. You're getting Reform and Farage praise Trump, and they're trying to push this angle that he's pro-peace. I felt that was more important to discuss. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's see.
Positive thing. But what do you say, both of you, coming to you first, Curtis, so what do you say to a lot of people messaging in, I'm sick of it. We've got problems at home. We've got pensioners that have got a freeze. They've got farmers that are going to be struggling, education, NHS. We know the usual suspects. We need money spent at home. Can we stop giving so much? What do you say to that attitude?
I completely agree. I thought it was quite, again, I'm not necessarily against aid being sent over, but I was really disgusted with Keir Starmer when he said he was going to send £3 billion a year, endlessly, essentially. At the same time, they're cutting winter fuel payments, they're keeping the two-child benefit cap, and Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer's political project has been, well, we're not really going to change much. We can't really invest in public services. The finances are shot. We won't raise taxes on like the super rich. I'm talking about like the Jeff Bezos of the world. But we're going to send endless money to Ukraine.
True.
Again, this isn't an ideological point for me because I'm not necessarily against it. But what does that say to the people watching at home who think I am struggling? Rents are going up. My mortgage is increasing.
Yeah.
And of course, we're going into Christmas, the winter period where obviously winter fuel payments again. To see a prime minister who says, I'm going to send money endlessly. I think it's so out of touch.
That you describe is very prevalent, but it was,
Shouldn't let
I
you
think,
finish.
really important in why Donald Trump won his victory. There was a lot of hostility. The word neocon was used a lot in relation to the Democrat leadership. I mean, I think that there are some really cranky people on the Trumpian side of things who've been incredibly dismissive of Zelensky and the Ukrainian struggle, which I think is very, very unfair. However, you know, people are right to say when they're struggling at home, when it's hard to, the cost of living is going up and inflation is so high as it has been in America and elsewhere. You know what? We should put ourselves first.
Well,
It's a very common sense.
Unfortunately, we've got to move on.
I do want to say though quickly about Trump that I know that you mentioned. I'm not saying that you're giving him credit, but there are people who are saying, "Well, Trump's in power, therefore things are getting better." It's not necessarily true. 'Cause he's not in power
What's that
yet.
expression?
But you essentially got the establishment who are trying to quickly resolve these issues before he gets in because they're worried about his recklessness. His record is he's a war hawk. His entire cabinet, or half of them, are war hawks. Mike Huckabee won't even recognise the West Bank. Marco Rubio, for example, in 2016, Donald Trump was incredibly hawkish, and I don't want this idea that somehow Trump is going to ensue peace and is the peace movement, anything but he's an establishment with establishment foreign policy. I think that is what I want to, make my point on.
I don't think that's true. I think
This is what annoyed me. Partly my fault, but she says we're running out of time. We need to move on. I say my bit, and then goes to Madeline, and it's like, oh well, I thought we were running out of time, but she gives her a response.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing GB News viewers aren't going to notice as well.
They're not going to notice. So I was a bit like, fuck. The reason why it's slightly my fault is I started to fuck up a little bit at the end, but I tried to make the point, like going to the specifics at why Trump's a war hawk and what to say about the drone strikes, about the Iran nuclear deal, and him saying that, the capital of Israel is Jerusalem, just saying it. I would have actually had like actual points to back up my argument, which I didn't get to. But yeah, like that bit was very annoying when she's like, "Oh, we're gonna run out of time, so we can't
Yeah.
speak." Oh, by the way, Madeline, what do you think? Which Madeline also said she admitted herself she doesn't know much about the war. Why would Dawn go to somebody who doesn't know much about it? But I feel like, I think overall she had more time to speak. I don't think that was even a conscious effort. That's an unconscious thing that
Yeah.
like, the right is more legitimate than the left,
Yeah.
and I
they
think that
take
happens
longer
in
to
the
tell
entire
it.
media.
A lot of Trump's policy, whatever you think of it, has been to do with trying to create new agreements that replace the old thing of America being a world policeman, so that they don't have.
Yeah, but that's not the case though. What's happening?
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
we'll have to.
I do have to refute that, but okay.
Yeah, so it's
Solve
like,
global peace. Soon. Okay, but we have to go to the news with Tatiana. And
We have to go to the news. Yeah.
so what was annoying is that she literally made falsehoods there, or her argument was completely bullshit, and that's was like, look, I have to refute this.
Yeah.
But she's like, no. That's like kind of, oh, all right, whatever.
Yeah, that's frustrating. It feels a bit like a pantomime, though. That's the thing that
Yeah.
it's still making me feel nervous. In that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Yeah, I feel Madeline was terrible on that. She didn't know what she was saying at all. That was just like word salad.
Mm.
And that's what I feel like. Was it? Is it literally just Dawn's own agenda that she doesn't want to talk about Russia? So she just used it as a chance to make it look like a pointless chat.
I don't
So
think
it's a
she
very
has.
strange one.
I don't think Dawn has a position. I don't think.
I don't think
she's
she has a clear
invested.
decision.
Yeah. So, you'll be happy
weird.
to know though it gets better. So
Okay.
the assisted dying was very conciliatory because we kind of agree and disagree. Ukraine, I felt like it was, she got more time than me. It was a bit unfair on me, but I think the last two topics, far better. I think I dominate the narrative better. So I think you'll feel a bit better going forward. Let's bring up. I mean, the video is titled Greg because I had to put it shorthand, but it's more serious than that.
Greg.
Treating the health sector on, and sort of like 9 years ago he voted for it.
Yep.
Now he's voting against it. The difference is he's being health secretary.
Yeah,
Okay.
Well,
exactly,
true.
and it's worrying that the Shabana Mahmood, the other MP, the other minister
Justice
who would have
Secretary, yeah.
the Justice Secretary.
The head of the Broadcasters Union, Becton, says the BBC needs to tackle open secrets about star behaviour following allegations about Greg Wallace. The presenter stepped back from MasterChef following allegations of inappropriate behaviour with industry insiders, suggesting that concerns were long-standing and well-known in TV circles. OK, I think we might have heard this from the BBC before. I mean, what is it with the BBC? And let's be honest, men who are accused of being a bit dodgy.
Quickly, Vicky makes a good point. It seems like men are more willing to go onto TV News than women, and I think that's absolutely like a safeguarding thing, or at least they might try to bully women from the left.
I think also maybe women don't get asked as much.
They might not. Yeah.
Generally, if you think about like prominent political commentators from the UK side, who there's not. I mean, Supatansky. Like, there's not that.
No, she
that
ain't the
large amount.
commentator.
I think
Sorry.
there is an element of that, definitely. I think in the same sense that like there's a lot of areas of like identity side where people would feel comfortable and not comfortable in an environment. Just weird on this one. So I'm assuming the whole point of this is to show that the BBC are full of pedos.
Yeah.
That's what she's trying to make the point of, right?
I
Like,
pick her up on the framing though.
yeah, it's weird that
Because
she
she automatically immediately goes into the BBC. And
Yeah.
I'm not having that because it's first of all, it's not just entire media, but it's like just fucking our entire society. But
And his jokes are making sexually inappropriate jokes, like Lawrence Fox said that he wouldn't shag that journalist when he was having his own GB News show.
do you want to know an interesting fact? Madeline Grant used to date Lawrence Fox.
It's interesting. I don't know if it's made me feel better.
I don't know if it's been.
Okay, sorry. Let's watch
Yeah,
this one.
let's
Yeah,
go.
let's see what she's
Ben
saying.
Hart outright proved of being dodgy. We all know who we're talking about, don't we? Madeline, what is it with the BBC and trying to keep things... I'm sorry, but they do. Trying to keep things quiet. Everything's an open secret. Jimmy Savile was an open secret. I mean, Esther Ranson said as much, she was the one leading the debate, wasn't she? Said as much at the time, back in the day. It was an open secret. Everybody knew about Jimmy Savile. BBC did nothing. Now, I'm not comparing what they've been accused of, by the way, but the MasterChef scandal,
That's exactly what she's
people
saying.
have known for 12 years or so they were warned, but nothing happened.
Well, I think that power does often corrupt, and you get many organisations in which you have these very powerful individuals, often men, who
Often
are kind of beyond.
Name me a woman that's done anything like this.
I'm sure I'm sure women would do other bad behaviour, but this does feel like quite a male thing. I'm not saying that women can't be bullies and unpleasant and so on, but there seems to be a real pattern where if you have the on-screen talent who they are valued because they bring in viewers and so forth, and then they're allowed to kind of get away with behaviour that would not be acceptable at a lower level of the organisation because they're special, they're the talent, and they have to be looked after. We have had a few of these stories about the BBC recently, so it's like, it seems like this is a particular problem there, but I think it's a problem in many large organisations.
I was going to say, to be fair, ITV did have a bit of an issue with Schofield.
I was going to challenge you on that framing there, because obviously the BBC, they have a terrible record of this, but I didn't like the framing that, what's the problem with the BBC? And I'm glad you kind of changed that, because it's a problem with our entire media ecosystem. First of all, we have culture, specifically men in relationship to power, who do this kind of thing, and it's always months later or years later they're found out. And then on top of that, let's talk about Philip Schofield, right? I had a debate about, or discussion about this, and we talk about sort of cancel culture. This guy's making a new TV show after what's happened. What worries me is the entire media ecosystem and those within it, and I think it's their relationship to power. I think there's a bit of a double standard here. I think, when it comes to Boris Johnson Partygate, when it comes to Keir Starmer taking a bunch of freebies, any scandals seem to be sort of swept under the rug if it's people within power. Now, the specifics on Greg Wallace is quite disgusting, actually, but you couldn't do that in an ordinary working-class office. He was naked with something covering his bits.
Allegedly.
I want to say,
Philip
allegedly.
Schofield has said his behaviour was ill-advised, but
ill-advised.
Not illegal.
Not illegal, but it's not something I would want in my workplace, and I'm sure you'd agree. But I feel like there's a class issue here. There's a double standard. If this, again, happens in ordinary working-class offices, it'd be zero tolerance, like it should. Why is that not happening in the media?
Right, okay.
And I think it's to do with the relationship.
I'm just going to say I'm not sure that would be. I think in industries that are generally working class, there are things like that happen a lot. Like a lot of the time. I get the logic of like following the idea of like it's the elite. I think it would have potentially been a good time to have specifically called out Lawrence Fox literally did this on your channel. Is it your problem? And maybe the populist side of it to that, I think that's where it intersects, right? Like if you're talking like inappropriate misogynistic stuff happens all the way. But
no, I think you're right. I guess I didn't mean to frame it as in like, it doesn't ever happen in these places, but if it did, it'd be terrible. I think I was trying to make the point that there's more of incentive to cover it up at the top to protect power, but probably I may not have conveyed that particularly well.
I think Davey said here, got hate crimed at work, didn't get fired because he brought money in. And I guess I think that can apply at I think that idea applies everywhere, right? Like if someone is considered valuable financially, then they are defended. Cool, let's go.
To power, I also want to say as well that the BBC outsourced the complaints to Banijay UK. That's a private limited company with its fingers in £500 million of profit. And I feel like the goal here is to make loads and loads of money. Are they really serving the workers there? I think that's a problem too. There was back in the Labour manifesto in 2017, there was a move to democratise the BBC. I don't think it should just be the BBC. Should be the entire media ecosystem. And when you have a democratic media, you have far more transparency and accountability. So I don't want to get just drawn into the BBC. I want to talk about the entire corporate media.
Okay, right. Is it just TV? Is it just a media company? What do you reckon? Let me know. What's it like where you work? gbnews.com/your say. Okay, now the
very short clip on that.
We have to read the legal statement out. Greg Wallace's lawyer.
I guess that's the point, right? It was going into a territory of the entire. Is there a reason that you didn't specifically say something that GB have done, and you sort of made it like an all? Because I guess there's the fear there of all sidesing. We're all as bad as each other.
Yeah,
versus everyone is bad, but GB are pretty bad for this one.
There wasn't a reason, simply because I just didn't think of it. We had certain. Because we knew this topic was going to come up, our preparation was to frame it this way. And that was probably we just didn't think of it. It's not a very good answer, is it? But
it's your first time going on, I guess. And you wouldn't have been invited back on if you'd said it. But I think that would have been a really good point to like they enable sex predators and sex pests.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have been like my goal wasn't to get invited on. Like, I wouldn't have like stopped my message thinking, oh, I might not get invited on again. Like, had I thought the GB News thing, I would have fucking said it. And if I don't get invited on again, so be it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, I think I'm happy with my performance overall. But yeah, the obviously things that like practice makes things better. And I think you when you draw experiences from, I mean, it was my first time on TV.
Yeah,
You
which
can
is
then,
really good. I think you've, by the way, in terms of like optics and how you've presented yourself, I think
Yeah.
you've done really well. Like, you're obviously very comfortable speaking on TV. I think that's really, really good. I know that I'm the most skeptical person in the world on this, but like as your actual performance, you did really, really well. I'm just scared about what the performance was for, kind of thing.
yeah.
Which is where I get
This
nervous.
is good though, because I like the fact that we can critique it though. It's only going to make it better and improve our message as well. So
We're not so different after all.
yeah,
Let's,
but unfortunately, part of the reason is because you're not given a lot of time. You are kind of like battling in your head which avenue to go with. Like,
Oh,
if this
yeah.
was a wider discussion, we could have talked about so many things, but that's not the way GB News or the mainstream media
And that's not what
works,
they
is
want
it?
either, right? They
Not what
want
they want,
their
no.
purpose for this is to show, look at us, we're being nicey nice. We've got the left and the right. Everybody's got good opinions. We don't only do shows that push propaganda, and that's it. But it's weird that the Russia one was a really weird standout. Although I guess actually the Greg Wallace thing isn't super lighthearted.
No,
either.
that's not lighthearted. No,
Yeah.
definitely not. But again, even I feel like it's framed in, I don't know. It was a weird one. I do feel like the last clip though is my strongest point because it is purely based on cost of living and class and inequality, and that's like I'm
And
glad
that's
I
a very
got stuck on
populist topic as well. These two are quite populist topics,
Yeah.
aren't they? It's anti-elites.
Yeah, and that is, I took every opportunity to do that because we are, reform are surging based on populist rhetoric. And in a way, I kind of shamelessly try to push that narrative in because, unfortunately, if the left are seen as not populist, i.e. not the real left, but like the establishment liberals, like the Democrats or the Labour Party, then reform are seen as the insurgency. Even though they're not the insurgency, they've got big money behind them. And all they do is just promote establishment politics, right? Then it's important that the left in all political spaces comes across as also anti-establishment. So, I mean, I definitely think it's worthwhile pushing that rhetoric. So there are certain messages, certain topics you kind of curate for a right-wing audience, and which is why we can sit here and critique and say, "Oh, maybe I should have said this, or should have done that,"
sure.
because we are talking to a good faith audience right now, which isn't the case with GB News.
Okay, so let's cost of living it.
Cost of living. Where am I?
This is London, right? This is a story in the Daily Mail today, and they have done other cities, and it's not much cheaper because you're not a Londoner, are you? Manchester, Bristol, Birmingham, Newcastle, and Cardiff all average around 355 quid for a festive day out with the family.
Lord.
Well, I'm glad you said about how Christmas has become commercialised. I think people aren't very happy with that. A lot of our festive holidays that we all cherish and we all love, I love my Christmas, I know you do.
I love Christmas.
Is being used as a profit-making machine. I mean, let's look at a specific example in your piece. I mean, Hamley Santa Grotto, most Hamley's workers earn just 11 to 13 pounds an hour, while the shareholders at the parent company...
What that quite say potion?
It's
Grotto.
It was unfortunate because you're just going into these elites with Santa's grotto, but I don't think I only heard that's just me over. I just haven't heard you say grotto before.
Yeah, but I don't say it that
Hamley's
badly.
franchising raking £7 million in profit.
Wow.
So what's going on here is essentially, and I think this is a wider issue, not just specifically with Christmas, is for the last 40 years, there's been a massive transfer of wealth from the working class and the middle class to the top 1%. And the reason why inequality is such a problem is because things such as this. People can't treat their families to a nice Christmas event. But also, more importantly, as we spoke about before, rents are going up, mortgages are increasing, people are struggling. Whilst those big companies who siphon all that wealth into the Cayman Islands and not pay any taxes on it are laughing. I mean, since COVID, right, the richest, and I don't mean like people who are successful, I'm talking about the billionaire class, have doubled.
I do have to talk about this, and there'll be another point. Someone criticised me saying, when you say rich, and those who worked for it, and I mentioned about CEOs and those who worked for it, well, they didn't really work for it. Again, this is simply because I'm curating my message. I'm on GB News. For us, when we say the rich, we're like, yeah, fuck the rich. But on GB News or right-wing audiences, a lot of people, when you say rich, they just think like people who have just done well. In our heads, rich is like the capitalist class, but they don't see it that way. So yes, I did kind of have to curate it a little bit by saying, I'm not talking about CEOs who work for the wealth. I know it's far more complicated than that. But again, I'm on GB News. But I did want to say more about the billionaire class, because that's where you get people who, both on the left and right, hate corporations. Now, of course, they hate corporations because they're seen as woke. We hate corporations because they literally just, they hate us. They want us to die. But yeah, so look, I'm not, I was criticized for that. I get it, but I am going to defend myself in that the fact that you've got to pick your battles. I didn't want to say us versus the CEOs, or that's, you know, is true. I want to say, wanted to say us versus the billionaire class.
Yeah, I think you could say, I think maybe, yeah, that would probably be one way you could say like the richest, like the billionaires, basically.
Yeah. That's why, again, when I say rich, I say, and when I mean rich, not CEOs, I mean billionaire class. Because again, unfortunately, when you say rich or CEOs, they'll go jealous lefty who is, you know, just because you don't like people being successful. That's what they think of. I wish when we said rich to them, they go, oh yeah, the people who control our lives, but they don't. So and also CEOs are like a bitch for capital. They're like the one and the same, working for the billionaires. But again, that's where we see it. They don't. So I was happy to like create like a false divide between CEOs and billionaire class. I'm happy to like capitulate, I guess, but that's not a big deal, I don't think, when the real conversation here is inequality. We
have a question in the chat. Are you okay to...
Sure.
Because I know this is the last segment as well, right? I know we're running over time, and I knew we would. I knew we'd talk about this a bit longer. This is a question from Celadon Faye. Can you criticize? I guess it's different from the question around working for them, right? What do you think on this?
Well, I mean, the biggest criticism I had for him is when he said, as like when he was running for the leadership, he's like, I will not write for the Sun. And then he kind of did it when he became leader. But the bigger thing here is Starmer writes in the Sun and the Daily Mail and agrees with them. Like, he pushes right-wing narratives in there. He says, we're going to curb immigration. We're going to do these things. We're not going to spend money. So if you're going to go into the Sun and write and basically tell them what they want to hear, I think that's fucking shameless. But whereas me, I'm going on GB News as a self-identified Marxist, trying to basically push Marxist talking points. I think that is entirely different. I do understand the question, though, because obviously, like, optically, you're like, oh, how can you criticize Starmer going on a right-wing platform?
Starmer could be a secret Marxist.
Starmer, first of all, Starmer isn't a lefty. So
he could be a secret socialist. You don't know. Give him time, Curtis.
There's never critical support for Starmer because he's not a lefty, so fuck whatever he does. But also, he wasn't going in there. I think it would have been slightly different, right? If and to be fair, it is icky. I mean, it's like going on GB News. It wasn't easy. It was icky for me as well. But if Jeremy Corbyn wrote in the Sun and said we need to tax billionaires, I'd be far more comfortable with that than Starmer going in the Sun saying, yeah, immigration's bad. So what matters the most is your message. And Starmer, he's a coward, and he just says the same things of what the readers want to hear. I'm not doing that. I'm pushing leftist policy packaged in a way that's a bit more easier and a bit more acceptable to a right-wing audience without capitulating on policy. You're just packaging it in a way which doesn't make me sound like a raging Marxist, which I am. I don't want them thinking I'm a raging Marxist. I want them to think, oh, he's just a just a standard guy with thoughts and opinions. I know it's just the game, but that's not what Starmer does.
Cool. Nice. Good question. Let's
Good question.
see what we got.
There well since COVID. Now, what I say to that is we need to rebalance the economy, and I'm talking about Great British unions for Great British
You're talking about
workers.
elves going on strike, aren't you? You're talking about Santa's elves going on strike so they can be wealthy. That's what you're talking.
Well, okay, so if we look back at the 70s, I know a lot of people like to point to the 70s, say,
I'm kind of joking a bit, Curtis, here. I don't expect Santa's elves don't go on strike. They're going to get your presents, all right?
we'll see about that. But, okay, some people might think it went too wrong the other way, whatever your beliefs on that. But this time it's gone too wrong the other way, where the richest in society...
Sorry to pause again. I know this is going to be a longer stream. Someone then also pulled me up and saying, were you trying to say that the 1970s that people were right to criticise unions? Again, as a socialist, I think that workers should own the means of production. There is never a point where unions go too far in terms of accumulating wealth for its workers. And by the way, I didn't actually say, oh, you'd be right to think they went too far. I said, maybe some people think they went too far, whatever you think. And that was actually specifically put in because me and Cog discussed this, and he came up with an analogy, right, where, I mean, initially we thought it was going to be Mark Dolan, which is like, but he said the G News are obsessed about talking about the 70s and like the winter of discontent, and like all right, we're going to do
And
it.
the Telegraph, actually, they always
The
talk about
Telegraph.
how Starmer's bringing everything back to the 70s.
So the reason why we discuss this point is because whenever you bring up unions, it's not a slam dunk. Unfortunately, they'll say, "What about the 70s? The unions fucked everything up." They didn't, but that's what they say. So Cog came up with this brilliant analogy, which is like, right, do you like a little bit of salt in your dinner? Tastes quite nice. Put loads of salt on, tastes horrible. So what I was trying to say is, even I personally don't think unions went too far. Absolutely not. People watching, and I would say almost everyone watching G News, right, would say unions went too far. But to be honest, does it really matter about what people think back in the 70s when I've only got a 5-minute segment? I'd rather talk about the state of things now. So that's why I kind of said, I think I did want to say, oh, I don't believe that, by the way. I think maybe I just forgot to say that. But I was like, whatever your beliefs, maybe you think it went too far, whatever. But right now it's gone too far the other way. It was just not to get caught on a trap, because had I said like, well, unions were great in the 70s, which I stand unions, they were like, oh, what about the 70s then? And we would have got drawn into a conversation about the 70s, and I would have been just another lefty who wants to take the country back to the 70s. So I was being smart here, and I was deliberate. I wanted to talk about today without getting drawn in. So it was a throwaway comment, and I will defend this again because you do have to be smart. But I think it would have been bad had I said unions went too far in the 70s, because I would have been lying, and I would have been lying to myself and people, but I didn't say that. But I wanted to address that because I did get a comment, and watching it back, I was like, I bet people might pull me up on that. So
I guess, yeah, because I think that is potentially the kind of thing that could be seen as giving ground, where maybe you didn't, like, if you could have potentially gone in a more direct route there, but it was like trying to cover your bases beforehand. Whereas I don't actually, to be honest, I think the people who are watching wouldn't have.
That's exactly it. The people watching Jimmy's wouldn't have noticed, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want the focus to be on the 70s. Now, I was only thinking of our left-wing audience pulling that up. But again, if I said that on Turn Left, you'd be like, why the fuck are you saying this on Turn Left?
Do you think was there a reason that you went direct to unions? Because I guess it was a cost of living question, right?
Well, we do get onto the wider issue, but the reason why unions were the biggest message is because union density is at an all-time low, and the government can do all sorts of brilliant things, but the biggest reason why there's been a transfer of wealth is because of weakening unions. It's because of collective power. That is the single biggest reason. That's my belief anyway. I do try and talk about public ownership and stuff, and that does only so much. But unions are the most radical thing workers can do. It's organizing. And we've completely lost that in our country. Like, unions are non-existent. And we will never transform this country without unions, because we don't have anyone in government that wants to represent workers anyway. So unions are our own defense, our only defense. I mean, Starmer doesn't give a shit about us.
Yeah.
Of course, Reform might bloody be in government. I don't know. They obviously don't care about us. The Tories don't care about us. So unions are the only thing the only tool we have. So I think wherever we can, we should be talking up unions. So that was the reason why I pushed that.
Right. Cool. I think, yeah, I'm so stuck in the Paul Marshalls of the world and everything. The first thing I always think when the reason the cost of living is going down, I'm like, because the rich won't pay their taxes, and shows like you keep blaming immigrants.
Well, literally, yeah.
I think the union's point's fair though. Cool. Let's go. Is she going to keep telling you that you need to lighten up?
The corporations are raking it in, and the working class are being decimated. And people watching at home, as we just discussed, people are struggling to pay. And I don't think it's particularly fair that those at the top are earning so much. And it's not just through hard work. I'm not talking about specific CEOs who've worked for their income. I'm talking about wealth. And what that means is public shareholders. That means our public institutions like the NHS, energy companies are being sold off to the highest bidder. Take back control of our public services.
£7 million for shareholders. Like, I don't know how many shareholders that is per person. Like, what is their profit? I mean, we have no way of knowing. I mean, maybe it's some extortionate figure, whatever that means. But I mean, I don't really know that nationalising Hamleys is really the way to go.
Well, I'm not saying that we should nationalise Hamleys, by the way.
But
I know you are.
I do think a big part of it also is that everything is more expensive, partly because we've had such a dysfunctional energy setup for a long time. You know, I think we've diversified away from fossil fuels far too quickly. We're currently importing them.
Misinformation. That's misinformation. You corrected that, right?
I didn't get a chance to, unfortunately.
That is pure oil and gas money misinformation from her. That's crazy.
But what the funny thing is, Dawn interjects. So, I mean, I do, going back, I do wish she didn't interject to correct her, but she just interjects.
This is the thing, like, she's the fact that she isn't interrupted when she's giving pure misinformation. Like, and even if people are watching you for the show, like, I'm sure I didn't know about how the energy mix works, is put together, until I started doing a job in that sector and was like, shit, I actually have to really know now. But like, people in our audience who might not get how it works are going to watch it. And if that stuff is just there, that's crazy.
Yeah. This is the thing, like, obviously critiquing myself, I don't pull her up on it. I kind of wish I did. However, the issue here,
I think you're stuck. I don't think you have that many options once you're in there. This is the thing. Yeah,
because if I say that's not true, I then have to explain the entire energy system. Because if I say that's not true and that's it, people are like, that doesn't mean anything. They need to explain how it's not true. But the reason why it's not true is is complicated to your average viewer.
I think you
and I never would have had enough time to say, like, basically the reason why it's not true is because in fact, oil is only going to increase because as the oil reserves deplete and scarcity increases, value goes up. It's only when you have an abundance of energy sources like the sun, like wind power, that's ultimately going to be free because it's there forever. You can't make a profit on it because it's literally there. Whereas obviously oil and gas, that's a finite resource. So trying to explain that, especially when you're going to have two other people on the table, it would have been impossible. Although I do completely accept any criticism that I didn't pull her up on it because that was pure misinformation. So if you criticize me for it, fair enough, I get that. But I
think it's fair that you didn't. I think you could have gone the Mick Lynch route and just been like, "That's a lie. You're lying," and you don't have to explain it further. Because at least then people have it in their mind of why has he said that. I also think realistic, like I don't think you. I think this is the thing of being in their environment. There's a lot of things that, the things that you're criticizing yourself for, I don't think you should criticize yourself for because I think they're fair. That in that circumstance, I think I'd do the same thing. But it's also you're in an environment where they set the rules.
They set the rules,
the problem.
And once again, it's my first time. You know, I think.
Yeah.
Calling someone a liar on TV
would be scary.
People work in the media for years and years and years. Politicians don't do that. Mick Lynch does it because he doesn't give a fuck.
And he doesn't get invited on TV anymore.
Yeah. So calling someone a liar, it doesn't come naturally to someone.
No,
anyway.
And I don't think that's what I mean. Though it's not a reflection on you; it's a reflection on the environment that they've created for you. There,
yeah,
they've brought you on knowing you've not been on before. They've put you in an environment that's like this. They've made jokes that you need to be more lighthearted. They've told you already, don't you need to let her speak. of course you're not going to then feel like you're in a I've seen you debate before. I think you would comfortably in certain environments be like, stop,
probably.
that's a lie. But
Yeah,
because
maybe, yeah.
but this is their context, this is their
Mm.
playing field. I think that's the
And I think
again what
I,
scares
I
me.
had my talking point ready. I knew where I wanted to go, and I just wanted to talk about the working class versus the billionaires. And right or wrong, I didn't want to be pulled into a different discussion, which would have been right. What specifically you're saying about energy is wrong. I think it could have taken me away about the broader point I make, which is just inequality is bad.
Yeah.
So,
which is the populist thing, yeah.
which is the populist thing.
Sorry, I got thrown in by that.
This was meant to be, right? A fun chat about elves going on strike, right? Because they're underpaid and we're all paying too much. And
I know, but we've gone up.
You mentioned COVID.
We've gone, yeah.
Well, I think we should
We've
look
gone
at.
full marks over here, so I'm just responding to that.
I think we should look at. I mean, I disregard that, but I think we should look at community wealth building, for example. That's a really good way. I mean, I want to put up Rachel Reeves actually, because she said a few years ago in the States. Sorry.
Rachel from Accounts.
Rachel from Accounts, yeah. Dodgy CV, should we say. She talks about in the States about how the state can have an active role in growing the economy and boosting wealth for ordinary people. Well, of course, they've missed their growth targets because they've followed the same economic system that we have for the last 40 years. That is deregulation, privatisation, and yes, weakening of unions. There are a few ways to combat that. I do think great British unions for great British workers is one thing, but the Preston model is another one. If you want to keep the economy local and keep wealth into the economy, look at using the state and the private sector, such as the National Investment Bank, is a really good idea, and keep the wealth with the local people, keep local, good quality paying jobs, rather than, again, all that wealth being shipped off to the Cayman Islands, not paying their taxes. And guess what? The politicians do nothing about it, because a lot of them, I say, are lobbied by these same people in government. We don't have a government, regardless if it's Tory or Labour or whoever, that works for us. They work for the billionaire class.
Okay. So, any case, the elves aren't going on strike. Santa will be turning up. And thank you both for not mentioning the black hole, because I'm sure if don't go there. I'm sure if Rachel from Accounts
I don't
was
even
here,
know
the
what
black
she was
hole
referencing
would be
there.
mentioned. Okay, and I just want a huge thank you to my panel, a parliamentary sketch writer at the Telegraph.
No, I know the financial black hole,
Yeah.
but I didn't get the whole like looking at me like don't go there, as in like we were discussing it behind the scenes. I was like, okay,
That's the
just making a
panto thing, though. But that's the secret of,
Panto.
we all get on, really,
Oh.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So I sort of just laughed and thought, okay, whatever. So yeah, that was first time on GB News, first time on TV.
Yeah, I think you presented very well. I think you would be very good on any panel. I think you did really, really well, and I think it's really, really scary environment. It just feels scary. I just want to get the purpose of it, because I think if the goal was to sort of change, because I think the populist angle is a really good angle for getting people to like you as an individual, but I don't think it's because I don't think that changes their perspective. Right-wing populists also don't like the left, like the rich, but they think of the rich as different things. They think of billionaires. They agree that they think the billionaires are bad. The problem is they think the billionaires are bad and they're funding immigrants.
Yes.
So I don't think that necessarily changes their perspective. I think that just shows that you align to theirs, which may shift the Overton window and help them to normalise that. Actually, across the board, we all agree, especially if you're not already radicalised to the right.
So so that makes sense to me. I don't know if I buy into that, because I feel like, so first of all, you want them to like you, not because I crave affection from right wingers, but because they won't listen to you if they hate you. That's
the messenger matters. That's a really important starting point.
It's all like
that's
politics.
One of the only things that changes people's perspectives
politics,
is that they trust the person.
Yeah, it's all about vibes, right? Unfortunately, I wish it was just purely politics. It's all vibes. The reason why I get what you're saying when you say like, well, if you do the populist rhetoric, they understand the populist rhetoric, it normalizes it. For me, I feel like it's the other way, where it's like, so this guy does think the same as me. However, he's saying the real issue is that the billionaires have control over our wealth rather than shipping in immigrants. Now, this strategy, by the way, going on GB News once, which, it's not exactly got massive views, was never going to change anything. I think it's about nudging, like being in political spaces all the time, nudging it slowly rather than just one appearance, unless I guess something goes viral. But again, if there was a clip that went viral where I dunked on someone, that only would have went viral on Twitter and would have kept the left happy. It wouldn't have. I mean, if when you watch your favorite person on TV, they get dunked, you're like, fuck, I don't like that. So that wouldn't have been like wouldn't have convinced anyone. It just would have been good for the left, right?
So would you want to go on this like as a regular?
So they want me back, right? And they were saying that I'd be good for Michelle Dewsbury.
What's her setup? Do you know? I haven't seen it.
Can't remember now. I mean, I think it's still usually 101. I think. And I feel like, I mean, my logic hasn't changed coming after the first show, so I wouldn't say no, because it hasn't changed. Like, if I came out thinking all the arguments I had before going on has changed, then why would I? But they haven't. I think the best thing is just improve the message and get things where there are certain things I should have said maybe next time. But yeah, I'm going to be honest. I would do it again.
Do you think there's a reason they'd invite you back if they think there's a chance of you actually changing their audience's perspectives? Do you actually think they would invite you back on?
Doubtful, but it doesn't matter. I don't care what GB News thinks. I don't care whether they think I change audiences' minds or not. I care whether I get the platform to speak to people to at least. It's not necessarily about changing people's minds. It's unlikely. It's more about getting people to think of another perspective. So at the moment, a lot of people, and this isn't just among right-wingers, this is among the entire population. The way people think left and right, and most people don't think of left and right, but the way especially the left is painted is screamy, angry, annoying people who just care about woke issues and high amounts of immigration. That's what they think. I don't think, by and large, the left is seen as also like supporters of unions, the working class. Like when you look at the history of like political movements, right? That's to the left. Like the reason I think an effective point when people make in the media is when they say, look, you know, without unions, you wouldn't get weekends and the 35-hour week, whatever. But you need to attach that to the left. I don't think people think that. So it might not necessarily be that I've convinced someone from the right to the left, but I do want to expose these people to leftist arguments that aren't platformed in the media, because I do think GB News platforms more lefties than like the BBC, but still overwhelmingly the so-called left-wing voice is the liberal. It's the I'm defending Rachel Reeves. Even Matthew Spalding, who I don't particularly like, when he was on GB News, he was like, oh, I'm an independent person. I don't really have a faction. He was still there to defend Rachel Reeves. I don't like that shit. And they also, by the way, GB News love it when you criticize Labour. Of course, that's a really good avenue for the left, because I can criticize Labour from the left, and then they're more likely to give you that space. Like, haha, this lefty's attacking Labour. We don't like them. Like, yeah, I know. Nor do I. So therefore, I'm not a partisan hack. Right wingers might listen to me because, oh, he's not wedded to Labour. And then I go, boom, here's my Marxist talking point.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that is, in terms of the those talking points, do you think the framing of, I think the thing that scares me, you put populist talking points in, which I think are good. I think left-wing populism is one of the best ways to defeat right-wing populism.
Yeah.
I don't know how many points was actually kind of counteracting or encouraging critical thinking for people in that sense. And bearing in mind that I think it will get people riled up at the elites.
By the way,
But then
for
the
some
next
reason
show
our broadcast is going to end in now.
Oh, well, please don't. Oh, it might, you know. Is it gonna? No, we're fine.
Oh, why did it say that? It said,
I don't know. I think
let me check YouTube. That's weird. It never said that we get.
I think it's just when it's 2 hours, because it's scheduled for 2 hours.
I didn't schedule it for 2 hours though.
I don't know. It has happened to me once before on a long debrief.
Oh, has it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank God for that. No, we're still here. I've never seen that
yeah.
before.
The fear for me is encouraging the anti-elitism stuff and the anti-Labour stuff, and then the next show that's on the channel, none of the other shows there are not going to be left wing. So I think it builds the sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of ways, I know that the thing is we have to expose the right to different perspectives. We have to engage them. I don't think there is a lot, and I'm only going off of research stuff because I obviously haven't been on TV loads of times. There's not any times. Maybe when I was like a child for some reason, but there's not a lot of research that demonstrates that having a single left-wing voice within a right-wing context will change minds. What will change minds is educating people on media literacy and critical thinking, getting people to question it for themselves.
But you have to get to that point in the first place. That's the problem.
On those topics, yeah, but I think that's what I mean in terms of if you are going to be on. I think that's why it's important to say, why are you talking about this thing? Like, it's encouraging a question, because otherwise you are being drawn into the topics that they want to talk about and in the way that they want you to behave. And I just think that I'm very scared by people saying that, GB News, rightly or wrongly, they have quite a lot of left-wing voices on. We know, like, why do they? Because they've been sacked off already as being crazy far-right people, and they need the left to legitimize them. I don't think they would invite people on if it wasn't serving a purpose for them. And I'm very scared of that purpose and what it's serving, which is also potentially why I think there aren't that many left-wing people who do go on.
Yeah.
And I get it. If it's pure publicity, I get it. I get the need for us to get our voices out there, and I do care, and I understand a lot of the comments that people have made in the chat. But I think there's the false impartiality and legitimacy is like the reason that we say liberals are so dangerous, and like centrists are so dangerous. And I think that's why I get very scared by.
But like in the absence of like us going on there, it doesn't change anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if we had the power, we'd be like, okay, if we went on there or didn't, it'd make a difference, but it doesn't. Like, the absence of us.
They would have brought a shit liberal on, and that person would have had shit arguments, and it would have been carried on being an echo chamber.
Yeah. So.
And I think that's kind of what that to me, I think starving, it's like boycotting. I don't know. Like, it feels like that kind of thing of, yeah, someone else could replace you, and they would be probably worse at making the points that you've made. Yeah. But if they like you.
So I mean, I don't know if I said this to you before, probably have, but like when I was younger, I was watching YouTube at the age of like 10, 11, right? Very young. Perfect demographic for the radical right. And in fact, I was a target for it because, the content I consumed that was just there was like the whole SJWs, third wave feminism, and I was eating that shit up. I was a 10-year-old kid who knew nothing about the world, and I was groomed to hate women. Luckily, I think having good, like, maybe it was instilled good values, that I never, like, completely took on those things on board. I was never like, I fucking hate women, but it was like, I support, like, women's equal rights. However, third wave feminism has gone too far. But that's the anchor point, isn't it? That's where you get people. Like, the right doesn't say women are bad ostensively. They'll say women have gone too far, and then that's how you draw them in. So I was getting drawn in a little bit. And I like to think that I would have just grown out of it. Who knows? And a lot of people don't. But I then came across some left-wing content, but it was particularly this guy called Carl Klinsky, Secular Talk, and I'm a big supporter of his, and it's probably the reason why I even started doing YouTube. And whether you agree or not, he was like, look, I don't talk about identity politics. I simply talk about the economy. I simply talk about the fact that the billionaires are taking over everything. It was left-wing populist message, right? And I started consuming that, thinking, this is brilliant. I love this, right? And through that pipeline, I was getting more and more exposed to these left-wing economics. It then changed me to a social progressive. So
I think that makes sense. That's good. Like, there's loads of things that socialize people to change perspectives, and exposure to people who talk about specific areas. Apolitical content, like content where people respect, like building that messenger to someone and having someone be trustworthy, like celebrities who will then suddenly speak on behalf of an issue. That's massive. That's got so much power. And filling a space, like I think the Turn Left guys, like, and like all of us do, where like there are people who will go on and who will watch like alt-right stuff, and then they like that tone or they like that style, but there's an alternative there. I think that's 100% super important. I think that's a really important thing.
And I think if I were to go on right-wing spaces and I just got someone on public ownership, right, I then think back to my days where economics moved me. And my logic here is that, let's say someone who's at home, who's floating to reform or wants or voted reform, and I talk about public ownership and how reform, the Tories and Labour all sing for the same economic hymn sheet of Thatcherism. And I can even say there's these political parties, even the Green Party, support public ownership, right? I do think there's, and to be fair, me and Lewis had a very interesting conversation when we did some Vox Pops about in Jeremy Corbyn's constituency. We spoke to a guy, right, for about 20 minutes, how he voted Green at the last election and then wanted to vote Reform. And he still resonated with the populist economic message. And guess what? He wasn't even reactionary on immigration, which threw me off a little bit, but he just felt like it was an emotional argument. It was like Reform felt like it was going to go in and bust things up. He wasn't even swayed on immigration or any particular policy. So if, I don't know, someone goes, look, I disagree with the green shit or the wokeness of the Greens, but I'm going to lend my vote to them because of public ownership, right? Then I think there'll be a pipeline to or people might think, right, well, I kind of like Reform was saying, but I'm never going to vote for them because they're not changing the economy in a fundamental way. And it could mean that if we convince, not me personally, but the entire leftist sphere encourages enough people to refrain from voting for the right because they were moved on a particular issue, I think that serves very well. It can't stop the rise of reform in the media, but I think that it's far better to not have a reform government, even if there's reform voices, than to have reform voices and a reform government. Again, I know these are big things, and I'm not saying that one appearance is going to do that, but I do think that you can sway people on one particular thing. They might then go, I don't want to vote for these people because they're not doing that, and enough people do that. I think that does change politics. That's where my head's at. That's what I see is logical.
I get that. I can see it. I think, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we've both got, to be honest, this is an unfortunate one because we've debated the topic and still don't agree. But if I can convince just one of you, no, I think, I think my mind, I don't think they'll let you on if you start succeeding at that. And I don't think they'd let anyone on if they started succeeding. So I fear that if you're worth it to them.
I suppose, isn't that an incentive to get to that point? Do you know what I mean? So
it
then
would
even
scare
though
me
started
that
succeeding,
it feels like it's almost like if you show that you're one of the good lefties who plays nice, like we know that in any I'm not saying it's the same as actually having an identity, because it's your political position. I'm not doing like the right wing thing of like, oh, it's like being persecuted for being right wing. But I do feel like in most contexts, if you're the well behaved person who it doesn't actually demonstrate to those people, oh, actually the left, it demonstrates to them you're one of the good ones. And then when the others don't behave that way, they go, well, that's like Curtis. I just don't want you to become the token lefty that's well behaved on the GB.
Yeah, I mean, I think the left is having a diversity of strategy. I think there is a space for people on the left to be seen as the reasonable person without capitulating in policy. I hate it when they capitulate in policy, right? Or trans rights. You don't need to do that. I don't believe so. And then other people won't do that. Like, so, and I think turn left is a good example of that. Like, our strategy is obviously diverse. Some of us, including yourself, don't think it's worth going on GB.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at the left as a macrocosm, you essentially got some people play a certain role. It sucks that you're playing the game, but it's not. It's attacking everything from different angles, right? Because you can't. There's a space for, and I'm not saying you are, by the way, but there is a space for the shouty lefty, and there's a space for the guy who looks.
I'm the shouty lefty.
Well, I mean, we'd like to shout and like being left, but like there's a space for that, and there's also a space for, like, I always say there's a space for Navarra media. Some people say they've gone a bit lib or whatever. I say, well, there's a space for Navarra media, and there's a space for turn left. There's a space for this sort of strategy, and there's a space for that. And that just brings me back to my idea of just occupying all political spaces. So I get what you mean. It's
Flooding
like,
the
I don't really-
message.
yeah,
Flooding a message is a very valuable tool. Like
yeah,
presenting your own arguments and your values in a positive way all the time, consistently everywhere. Totally agree. Getting people to be visible in every single aspect that they
yeah,
can be is a way of transforming people's
mm,
perspectives. Like debunking information is not as valuable from that side as well.
yeah,
But flooding, like presenting your own case consistently again and again, that's a confirmed
mm.
way of like adapting social perspectives from
I
that
think it'd
side.
be a mistake if you tried to like mold yourself in every avenue. But I
Hmm.
think it's okay for certain figures. So if I'm the guy that goes on GB News, but then we've got people on turn left are absolutely refuse to do it, I think that can work. I think what wouldn't work is if it was just one person and they're trying to be like, I'm the guy on GB News, but also I'm also this.
No, because I do think it would be again, yeah, it's trying to be all things at all times.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but obviously, I will never ever capitulate on my values. And if I ever saw that that was what was required to stay on TV, not just GBs but anything, I'll stop it
Hmm.
because I'm not going to
I
do
know.
that. And I think some people go down that pipeline where, and this is where we need to hold each other accountable. I need to hold myself accountable, right? But that's where you do see a pipeline of people capitulating on issues because they're like internally like, all right, I don't actually agree with capitulating, but if I could still have my slot on TV, I can still convince people. Well, it gets to the point that when you capitulate, you're just agreeing with them.
Well, yeah, I think that's what's scary. That's what I think is the thing that you want to push every single time you go on there. That's what I was nervous about the oil and gas thing.
Yeah.
Also, obviously the unions. Maybe sometimes it goes too far. Like I know you didn't mean to say it,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's
absolutely.
there's change it like changing your language, changing your message in order to like get through the semantics part. I think that's where it's really, really important to just not let that happen at all.
Hmm.
Um,
But like,
yeah.
as I was saying that, like, if or other people said, and I didn't realize it, that it's like it sounds like you really are capitulating. End it there.
Hmm.
It's you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm naive though. Maybe that can't happen, and you then relook at the strategy. Like right now, it's we're looking too far ahead. It is only just one appearance, but down the line, it doesn't mean because we've decided to do it once that's it. That's our strategy now. It
Hmm.
could be that actually, right, it's been like 6 months. What have you actually done? Has this worked? It's been a complete failure. And I'd be like, you're right. Then you could be like, fuck it then, fuck it off.
Yeah.
I would rather do that than be like, no, I want to have a left-wing career in the media and I'm going to capitulate on trans rights and all that sort of shit. Fuck that shit, because I ain't
Yeah.
doing it.
It's like was his Chomsky quote. I can never remember quotes properly. It was that interview with Andrew Marr where he was like, "The reason you're here is because you're allowed to be here."
Yes.
Basically,
Yes. Well, it
that's
was like you're not purposely self-censoring, but you're put there because of your opinion.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that's when it comes down to what's worth it.
Yeah, and I think it's and you're providing such a valuable critique here because whatever happens, whatever strategy you go down, you must be aware that that's the role you're playing. And given that I was like, oh, I'm probably going to be the token lefty. Like, as long as you know that's like that's your role, it's important to know that. To go in thinking, oh, thank you, GB News, for letting me on. You're completely naive and you're being played for a fool, and that's why your critique is so important. Because you need to know this is what they want of you, and you need to know that, bear that in mind.
Yeah. But you're feeling. I think you presented yourself well.
Yeah.
I think it's Lewis did a great job with the shirt. Lenny did the shirt as well. I think yeah,
Yeah.
it's and I've managed to get through that lady speaking. I
Yeah.
didn't get too angry about it. So I think actually, really, it's a good job, well done to me as well. Emotion. So actually, really,
Yeah.
um,
But also,
but
like, I think at the end of the day, if we can just use GB News to catapult us to get to the BBC and other things, and then leave GB News behind, I do think there is utility in that. I think if you were to end up accepting, oh, maybe we'll just be on GB News for the rest of our lives and we'll be that left-wing voice, that's not a good strategy, and that's where you get comfortable and you become the truly token lefty. Like, this is a means to an end. maybe it's a bit of a dirty road.
Maybe we should set a time limit on how many times we appear before.
Yeah,
we
maybe
call
that's
it.
a good idea. Maybe it's been like, right, Curtis, if you're
Like,
90 years old and you've
yeah.
not convinced a single person.
45th time's a charm. Like,
Yeah.
especially when they've said, like you said, they have lefties on GB, but they don't have them on the BBC.
Yeah. But there have
it
been
might be
people who have
different.
gone on GB News who've then gone on to BBC. So
If they, I don't know. I'm going to keep saying the same thing. I'm going to keep saying, oh, well, if you behave, maybe they'll let you on.
yeah. Well, you need to keep reminding me and us of that because it's so important. You know, you're safeguarding as well. Like it's important that you say that.
I feel like I'm the complainy.
We need that.
One in this. I'm the complainy one on this channel.
Yeah.
Listen, it's 10:30.
It is 10:30.
Talked it through. Everybody, thank you very much for joining us. I'm not surprised. Obviously, I'm not surprised that you stayed with us. I thought you would because we're a great channel, and that's and we weren't just having a normal chat, but with people watching.
Oh, I forgot you were there.
It was actually a really involved thing. Just to say, Holly, thank you so much for becoming a member. Join Turn Left so they have my money, trans rights. Appreciate you.
Woo.
That is very sweet. Are you hosting tomorrow evening?
That's all up in the air. None of us have filled in the schedule yet.
What's happened, everyone, is that we had a spreadsheet. We had a spreadsheet that had all of our times and all of our dates for performances, for shows. And it ended.
Yeah, it got to the 1st of December. It was like, no one exists.
It ended 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And now we don't. But join us tomorrow.
Maybe. I'm not going to put up the stream to say tomorrow and let people down because there's mad times like to cancel. So you will see a notification and that's when we're on tomorrow.
We're going to let you know.
I will do my best to make sure that we have a show tomorrow though. And I probably will host it. But it will absolutely be nothing to do with GB News. Like I'm GB Newsed out and I'm sure you guys are as well. It's back to
the news,
the real news.
This is what they wanted. We've spent this whole stream talking about it, but I think it's a good topic to discuss. But yeah, we will back onto the actual stories that we want to cover.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much, everybody. Should we do quick little plug? If you've enjoyed the show, if you've enjoyed this, support. I've forgotten how to do it.
You just say give.
Hi guys, pay up. Hi all. As you can tell, we're still voluntary. We're still going. Everything that we're doing is because we actually care about it, because we're passionate about the topics that we're discussing, and we love bringing them to you. So if you do want to support us financially or in any other way, you can do it over at turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. If you are unable to do that, that is absolutely fine. If you can share, like, comment. One of the things that I've mentioned recently, the stream will end after like 30 seconds of us being off. If you can wait around, leave a nice comment, leave a like. I don't know if copying the share thing works on here. I don't know if that is just a TikTok thing, but do it anyway, just in case. It only takes you like 1 second. We'd appreciate all of your support. Do you want to add to anything?
Did you say the website?
Yeah.
You did, sorry.
Yeah, turnleftmedia.co.uk/support.
Yay!
And I said it really clearly. I
don't have much to say. I think I'm talked out. We've spoken for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I've not had my dinner yet. It's 10:30, which is bad. Have you had yours? Have you ate?
No,
actually?
I need to walk my dog as well.
Do you?
Stupid dog.
Is it safe, like walking around where you are, though?
Manchester.
I'm just checking. I'm just checking.
I'm
being like Lewis now. I'm being all muffly. Like, what do you call me, a momager?
Momager, yeah. I haven't eaten and I haven't walked my dog, but I will walk my dog and be safe. And everybody else, if you haven't eaten, I'm sure you have. You should have. This is me being a toxic mum. You should have eaten already. That's your choice.
Maybe we should just like change the turn mum. No, that sounds weird, isn't it?
Thank you all for thank you all for a lovely evening. We will
all right, then.
Again soon. That's Curtis. I'm Secret. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.